Hello everybody, welcome into my latest live broadcast. It is Wednesday, the 27th of November, 2024. I'm Kerry Holzman. Tomorrow, it's Thanksgiving here in the US of A. I hope all of everybody watching has a great Thursday, and especially those of us here celebrating Thanksgiving and joining our family and friends for no work, just a meal and a get-together. And if not for that, I would probably see my family even less often as I continue to drive myself towards what I think is success. I prioritize that over everything else. And so Thanksgiving sort of forces us Americans to say, stop, no work today, hang out with your family, spend some time with your family, spend some time with your friends, the people closest to you. And that's what it's all about. So I hope all of you have a wonderful Thanksgiving Day tomorrow. We will have no broadcast tomorrow, but let me rephrase. We're going to air all 8 parts, all 29 and a half hours of the Big Beast build all day tomorrow. Maybe we'll start that around midnight tonight and just let it run. And that will either be a rebroadcast of the series of 8 live videos, or I can either upload the whole thing as one big video. Haven't decided yet. But yeah, parts 1 through 8, beginning to end, on the Big Beast build that Doug Betts over at Live Windows Training with Doug Betts is using for his live streams every single day, pretty much. So anyway, if you see that, just know that that is a repeat from a previous series. And you see, if I make it live, then the chat room's active. But if I just upload it as a video, there's no chat room. Let me know your preference. And in the meantime, hello everybody joining us in the chat. I want to say a thank you once again to our friend Charlie Purdy, who sent an Amazon gift card I did not see during yesterday's live video, and I want to thank him for that, and I apologize for not acknowledging it at the time. And we certainly appreciate all the support we get from all of you that enables us to continue doing what we're doing at this scale. Our friend Peter Laycock, speaking of which, we call him Buster. He's contributed 10 pounds. He says, good evening, Kerry and Marlena and everyone in the chat. All the best from Bonnie, Scotland, where the temperature in Edinburgh, 29 degrees Fahrenheit, is 1.6 degrees Celsius. Probably best to stay indoors today, huh? Good to see you, Buster. Thank you, as always, for your friendship and your generosity. There's Charlie Purdy there in the chat room, speaking of the devil. Mark Gaines with a 10-pound contribution joining us from Northern Ireland says, hello, Kerry, Marlena, and everyone in the chat from a very foggy Northern Ireland. You know what? He says it's a -2 there. I haven't seen fog since I lived in California. I don't miss it. Yeah. But it's, at least if you're driving, if you're out walking around, it's kind of cool. Let's see. Hello to William Lynn and Sci-Fi Games, all saying hello. Timothy Runquist joins us, as well with Jonathan and Garfield Rupe saying hello in the chat. Welcome in, guys. Marsman50 joins us. Mortant 1210, welcome in, friend. Good to see you again. And as we scroll down through the chat, Parker Morse says hello. 55 Staying Dude says hello. Marco, joining us all the way from Italy, says, I could export the fog from here if you like. I'd prefer if you'd export the pizza and the pasta. Thanks for joining us, Marco. Good to see you. Gary Tatum says hello, along with Paul Connolly in Australia. All right, now today I think we're actually going to get some work done. What do you think? We're so close to finishing this. I mean, why not? Let's just finish saying our hellos. John Lewis joins us all the way from Brazil. Wow, Brazil, Scotland, Ireland, Australia, Italy, and we're just getting started. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. 55 Staying Dudes in Oklahoma. And Sci-Fi Games is in Michigan. Ah, my home. My long-lost home. I do intend to make it back one day. So jealous. All right, so what do we have to do today? Well, we're going to just finish up what we've got here. We've done 4 parts previous to this. Yesterday was supposed to be part 5, but it turned into a Ask Me Anything, and I can't tell you how much I love that. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I would much rather interact with you guys live. than just make a video and not be able to pay attention to the chat room. Because the whole point of YouTube, in my opinion, what differentiates it from podcasts and TV shows is that we get to talk to you. But a lot of the viewers treat it like a TV show, and they're missing out on half of the fun. So once in a while, you know, we get some participation, but yesterday the participation was off the charts. So I said, you know what, this can wait. I want to talk to you guys. And we spent the whole show just talking about whatever. And I love that. I could do that every day. But I do have to earn a living, and I do have to get some work done. And I think this is going to look amazing. Now, we've had a couple of hiccups if you've been following along with us. Just figuring out how the case comes apart, figuring out where the radiator wouldn't fit. I thought it was, well, even the original case we were going to put this in wasn't going to work. We've had a number of false expectations. And that threw me off because it's not like I'm going into something blind and I'm being surprised with parts. I had a preconceived notion that that cooler was going to come out and fit right in. And that made it harder to figure out because I wasn't expecting that to happen. If I had not had these preconceived notions that the prior case was going to be fine, or, you know, the way this case opened up would have been more obvious, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't what I was expecting. So because I had set myself up with false expectations, everything took 3 times longer because it blindsided me. Now, if somebody just brought random parts onto the bench and said, here, build this, I'd be looking at everything more carefully, and I wouldn't allow my mind to wander onto other things as I think of this as a routine. I just slide slot A into tab B, and you know, it's super easy. That is not what this was, but it was what I was expecting it to be. So when it wasn't working, instead of trying to diagnose what the problem was with regards to the fitment, I was trying to figure out if these two things are supposed to go together easily, what part am I missing versus the regular thought I would have, which is, why aren't these two things fitting? And you have to understand that by having the false expectation that all I had to do was take the cooler and the radiator out of the box and slide it in. That is true on some Lian Li cases. It just happens to not be true with that cooler in this case. And I didn't know that. So the first thing I'm trying to figure out is, why isn't it just slipping right in? What am I doing wrong to make this just slip into place? That leads me to the second point of thought, which would have been my original point of thought if I had not had the preconceived idea, which is, let's take a look at what we have to modify to make this fit, because I thought I didn't have to modify anything. Same is true with the case, the original Black Widow case, which was originally part 2. Part 2 could be completely removed. We just go from 1 to 3 to 4. Part 4 was mostly trying to figure this cooler out. It was maddening. Part 3 was just trying to get all the fans in together and how they snapped together, which really mostly met my expectations, but it was still a new experience for me. And we've never powered these fans on. The fans that are here and here were returns from Amazon because they're expensive. They'll save me $50. They had a couple of extra cables, and I had to discern, do we need all those cables? And I'm still not sure, but I'm pretty sure we don't need all those cables. They're just for different ways of hooking up the fans. And I've also figured out these all come with fan controllers, and I'm hoping one fan controller will be enough, since they're all Lian Li fans on the radiator, on the base, and on the back. So everything should be much, much easier on cable management. But this is why I'm always emphasizing making sure you understand expectations before you move forward with a purchasing decision, because stuff like this will happen if your expectations are wrong. And then it's frustrating. It can be a little maddening. People who watch the videos think they're watching a commercial and go, how can this guy making a commercial not know how he's putting together the product? It's because I don't make commercials. It's pretty interesting. Some viewers don't get what we're doing here. And it's no point in trying to explain it to them. You know, they don't want to be a part of this community. They want to take and leave. Give me and I'm going. They don't want to stick around. They don't want to make friends. They just show me the gold that you're offering in this video. Get to it quick. Let me take it and let me go. And they won't say thank you. They won't introduce themselves, and they will not be a part of this community. So those people are not a good fit for us. So I don't even respond to them anymore. It's like, okay, there's plenty of channels that already do that. You go do that over there. We're building community here. And one of the main differences between my channel and pretty much any other channel on YouTube is the fact that we get to hang out together. And it's not just me talking to you, but you get to talk back. And I got to tell you, that is what makes this so much fun for me. Otherwise, I could just turn the camera off and work. There's what's in it for me? You understand what I'm saying? Like, to go through all this effort to schedule a time to do this. I could have done this at 2 o'clock in the morning by myself. I like hanging out with you guys, but if you guys are completely silent, it's like you're not here. And at that point, why is the camera on? Because the YouTube revenues, they're just not there anymore. And what we're looking for is building community. And we'd love to have other like-minded, kind individuals be a part of this community. There's plenty of room for more people. And I just really enjoy the interactivity of it. And for people who don't get that, it's simply not the right channel for that. It's not for them to complain about. It'd be like me going to a television network like ESPN and telling them you play too many sports, put on something else. I think the people at ESPN will be like, I don't think you understand what this channel's for. All right, so that's sort of on the back end of things that I deal with, but you guys probably already know, most of you probably already know this. David Graham with a $2 super chat says hello from the Invisible Man. And let's see, he says it's overcast in Detroit. Who is saying that? It's overcast in Detroit all the time. Sci-Fi Games says we got 43 degrees Fahrenheit here in Lower Michigan. Garfield Rupe says hello. Terry joins us and says hello. Greg C. says, longtime viewer, vision issues have prevented seeing chat. I'm trying it out. Hope it goes through. Welcome in, Greg. Good to see you. Thank you for saying hello. William Lynn said, YouTube and Google are losing money. Life is getting more expensive. Well, that's not why they're losing money. They're losing money because the viewers' interests have changed. So where viewers were watching a lot of content, viewers' habits and desires are, we have a younger generation getting older, and their values in my generation, which I'm sure many of you are around my age, within 10 years, one way or the other, for the most part, we were brought up with certain values. And we're not going to see a lot of 18-year-olds in this channel. We never have. We're not Skivity Toilet. Well, those would be 8-year-olds. The point is, the viewership is changing. The interests of the younger generation, who are starting to have kids of their own and getting busy in their lives, don't have the free time they used to have. And the interest in PCs overall is also shifting from the consumer side of things, which YouTube is a mostly consumer and not a business platform. So Spotify has now gotten into the spot, and they want to take away, or at least offer finally some competition to YouTube. And how it's going to be monetized, they haven't been really clear on. But I'm looking very much forward to having a second channel, mostly with the same content re-uploaded to Spotify. I've already started that. And we'll see if that, there's no harm in taking content I've already made and putting it over there. It's just a question of, will it ever take a foothold there? Twitch was never a good platform for me because it's maybe 90% of the people there are interested in gaming, and 10% of the people there may be interested in building a gaming PC. It's not the right platform for me. And then there's some other platforms like Odyssey and Rumble, and they're just not, they're not known to the general public. They're not household names, so they don't get the traffic that YouTube gets. And as a result, with less traffic that YouTube's getting now, sponsors are less likely wanting to advertise, and if they do, they're not going to pay as much for less traffic. Commercials during the Super Bowl here in the United States are the most expensive commercials on television ever. And that's because of how many viewers it has. Now, if you want to air a commercial during afternoon soap operas, those are relatively inexpensive because much fewer people are watching. So the sponsorship money is directly related to how much YouTube makes, and that's directly related to how much the content creators make. And of course, the more content creators you have, the more that same money has to get divided up in smaller pieces. And then you have an oversaturation where you may have more content creators than you have viewers, which is kind of what happened. And so now we're seeing this washout where a lot of content creators have gone away. And it's starting to recover, but the viewers aren't necessarily coming back. We're sticking with the viewers we've had, but the number of new viewers discovering an interest in building computers isn't what it used to be. They're still happening, but at a much smaller scale. But you never know. Maybe it'll come back, or if not, it doesn't. But I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing until I don't want to do it anymore. So you got nothing to worry about. And we appreciate you being here. Giordani says, has become a supporter now at least 24 months. The badge says 24, but it won't change again until you hit 36. Giordani, welcome back in. Good to see you, my friend. Chico48 with a $10 super chat. Right on. Thank you, Chico48. Michael Truesdale says hello from Maricopa, right here in Arizona. And Chico48 says, happy Thanksgiving to all. Right on. Back at you, my friend. Dan Nelson says hello as well. And of course, Mara's in the chat room and still cooking for tomorrow. She's got things going in the kitchen and then going into the other room to hang out in the chat, and then she's going back into the kitchen. So if there's a delay in response from her today, it may be because she's temporarily stepped out of the room to check on what's cooking. Smells great in here, by the way. Too bad we don't have smell on YouTube. Actually, probably for the best that we don't. There's some content creators that might have a little too much fun with that. All right, so putting the cooler back, I got to put the pump on here, right? Which means we got to feed it through this grommet, and then we've got to just wire it all up. We fire it up, make sure everything's working, check our temps, make sure the pump's working and cooling the chip properly, and then it's a simple matter of putting the glass panels back on, and we're done. Now, I will do some cable management, but just to speed up the video today, I'll probably just jam the cables back there, slap the panel on it, because it won't look any different to you one way or the other, or to anybody else once that panel's on. But for my own sanity, I'm going to need to clean those cables up. And the more I keep working on this computer, the more I just really like its look. And the way I'm visualizing this is not with RGB, with colors, but just maybe with a white or a blue on everything. Not fading, not flashing, not moving. Just a nice blue hue everywhere with the white case. I think it's going to look elegant. Just ice comes to mind. So I'll come up with a clever name for this thing, but if you got a good name, you let me know. Let's see here. I guess I'm going to start by putting the block on. Now remember, when we do this, I'm not reading any of the manuals or instructions. Everything should be intuitive for somebody like me that's been in this industry for over 30 years. If it isn't intuitive to me, it's probably a bad design or I'm having a bad day. Again, we're not trying to make a commercial. We're just trying to keep it real. We're trying to replicate what most home users do when they watch a video and they go buy something that they see. They rip it out of the box and they start using it. Never, ever so much as read the instructions or even peel the plastic protective plastic film off of many devices that I think is absolutely crazy. They're so anxious, you know, they just want to get it out of the box and go. So we're trying to replicate the way most people at home do this. And also, if it's difficult for me, right, if it's not intuitive for me, at least you can see how I figure it out and I demonstrate the critical thinking process. Now, there's no harm in reading the manuals. That's why they're there. But that's also like buying a game and then reading how to cheat in the game or how to get through the game. Here's everything you need to do in this game to get to the next level. It's called a walkthrough. I don't want any walkthroughs because in real life, what I do for a living is I go out to customers' locations, customers I've never met before, seeing computers I've never seen before. They may be pre-built, they may be something they did themselves. I have no idea what I'm in for until I get there. And once I get there, if I don't have all the tools I need to fix that job, I got to come all the way back and then go all the way back over there. And all of a sudden, any sort of profit margin dips down and down and down. So for me, this more closely represents what I do for a living, because if you're curious about what it's like to be a field service tech, this is kind of like what it's like. No customer wants to sit there watching you read a manual, because the customer's attitude is, why are you reading a manual? Didn't I hire a professional? Don't you know what you're doing? If I hired a plumber, or if I hired an air conditioning specialist, and they came over here and one of the first things they did was open a manual, I would lose all confidence that that person has any clue what they're doing. So, just telling you, that's what customers think. Now, I have temporarily tied these cables up in the back because I didn't want them dragging all over. So let me just, that's why I save these wire ties. It's just good for temporary holding back of the wires here. So we've got a fan power and RGB cable for the back fans. For the bottom fans, we have another one. And on the pump, we have another one. I'm not sure where that's supposed to go. And then we have the header that goes on the motherboard for the pump. Okay, I mean, that looks easy. Everything is white on this build. Our power supply, all the cabling is white. Devil's in the details. And I suppose one of the first things we're going to have to do here is clean the top of the CPU off, because we put a temporary cooler on this in part one when we're prepping the board to make sure everything works before we go through the process of installing everything. And everything works, but that cooler was definitely not adequate for what we were doing. This cooler should be overkill, should be, and we'll find out once we get it done here. Let me jump back over here for a second. There we go. I'm trying to see both my OBS feed and the chat room. There, that should get it. So I need isopropyl alcohol, the highest alcohol content possible. You can use lower alcohol content. It just leaves a little bit of residue. It's not going to make that big of a difference. But if you can, if it's an option, make sure you get as close to 100% isopropyl alcohol for electronics cleaning. We used to use this exact same thing cleaning the heads on tape recorders, reel-to-reels, VHS players. Nothing's changed. We still use high alcohol content isopropyl, or it has a nickname, 8 IPL, I can't remember. Anyway, it's always been the same since the 70s. We've always used this. Maybe before that, but I wouldn't know. In some ways, as the technology advances, it stays the same. So all I want to do is pull the old thermal compound out of here and clean it up a little bit, even though you're never going to see this. The water block's going to cover, you know, this plate that we've got around it. So enjoy how pretty it looks, because you're never going to see it again. It'd be sort of like having an RGB CPU and then you just throw a cooler on it. You can't see it. It's funny, but people essentially do that when they're buying like RGB RAM, and then they end up covering it up with a big air cooler like a Noctua NH15, and it just goes right over the RAM, and you just see like a shadow of the bleed out of the RGB, which is very subtle and almost unnoticeable. It's like, I don't think you really thought that one through when you were ordering those parts. So if you really want to show off your computer, a liquid cooler is the way to go. Also, if you're somebody who wants to overclock your machine, or you plan on, for whatever reason, you want your CPU to run really, really cool, or you have a very high-end CPU like one of the KS series, or maybe even some of the high-end Ultra 9 and Core i9 K series chips, liquid cooler's probably a good idea. Otherwise, you have to go with a giant cooler. Like, you may not have a choice but to go to something massive that's going to cover up all the other aesthetically pleasing parts you put around the CPU, such as RGB RAM. And you may not realize that until it's done, and then it's working well, but it doesn't look as good. It doesn't look like the way you pictured it, which takes us back to setting your expectations correctly. That way things turn out the way you expected them to, and then you have a more enjoyable building experience, and you get the end result you were looking forward to, that you pictured in your head. It's very common. People order things with a vision in their head. It doesn't go together that way. And I've demonstrated that 3 times in this series. Now, the big question that people wanted to know was, will this big water block here, if I can spin this around, will this fit through this hole right here? And the answer is yes, it will. We did a test fit on it, and it's tight, but once you get the big pump head through, then it's just hoses, so it's no big deal. I want to clear these. These are the boxes that had the fans, right? They still have, this one still has a fan in it because it's heavy, along with any spare wires and spare screws, and the fan controllers are in each of these, so I'm holding on to these boxes. These are the modular cables for the Thermaltake power supply. This is just an RGB power extension cable to add a little more color to this. I'm not going to worry about that today. We'll see how time goes if we get to that. So let's just move this right over here for now, so I have more space to work with. Then we've got these screws over here, which go to put the case back together. Now, any additional screws we might need, we have in the motherboard box, along with any documentation. Just because I don't read it doesn't mean I throw it away. I keep everything in the motherboard box. Whether I'm building it for myself or I'm selling it to a customer, we put everything from the power cable you need to plug the computer in, Wi-Fi antennas, any additional leftover parts, screws, stickers. I don't put stickers on machines. The customer can do that, all in the box. And I always tell my customers, look, there's nothing in this box you should need anytime soon. However, if we ever do a repair or an upgrade, I might ask you for this box, because it's going to have certain screws that only fit in this case. Please put this box away somewhere where you can find it in 2 years. And they say, okay, and then when we need it, I go, do you have the motherboard box? And more often than not, they go, the what? The box I gave you with the computer. You didn't give me a box with the computer. All right, let's see if I can get this through here. Now, it's easier to just simply take this piece off, but you know me, I like to do things the hard way. Just shove it through. Well, it's going to come off all on its own. All right, see, no big deal. And we'll run the cables all the way through for right now, just to give us some play, some slack. And let me turn this around. And we're going to need to pull through this cable here. This will be the CPU power cable, or this is going to power the pump that goes onto the motherboard header just like a CPU fan would. So we need it on this side of this grommet. And one of the reasons I didn't want to take the grommet off is if I were to reverse it, you know, by handling it, and then I feed this through, and then I realize where this grommet comes outward, it would be going inward, and it wouldn't look right. I'd be looking at it going, why doesn't that look right? So by doing it that way and letting it just come off naturally, it didn't change the orientation, the up, the down, or the forward or the back. And that prevented me from having any future confusion. Just putting in one little stupid piece like this could spend half an hour trying to fit it back in if you weren't paying really close attention on how it came off. You put it on backwards, flip it upside down, or flip it around the other way. It will fit, it just won't look right. Paul Howe joins us and says hello, welcome in. There's Cord Oliver saying hello. And let's take a look here. I have a cable, this long cable coming off the pump, and it's dragging across the desk as I spin the computer around. And so what I recommend that you do is what I'm doing right now, which I'm going to put that wire tie back on. In fact, I'm going to grab all these loose cables just like I had them before. I want to just grab a spare wire tie to temporarily hold these cables out of our way. and that's going to make less potential for knocking things off the desk or having the cable catch on the drawer handles. So just tie that up. I'm not going to waste a cable tie. Just a simple wire tie to temporarily hold those out of the way is all we need. Now this cooler did not come with any pre-applied thermal compound. We have to apply our own. I've got plenty, but I always prefer to use what the manufacturer includes. And so in the motherboard box, we should have that. Let me just, over here for the box we just put away. See, I already need to get into it that quickly. But at least I'm not digging around. I know exactly where it is. I know it's in here, somewhere in this little area right here. So we open that up. We've got the case manual here. We've got our ASRock Go Faster sticker. We have, oh, these are the pump installation brackets. We're going to need those. And let's see, SATA cables we don't need. We got some white wire ties. That's a nice touch. I only use black wire ties because I usually only build black cases. Didn't occur to me. These will blend right in. You'll barely see them. These are spare screws if we need them. This is our old CPU socket frame in case we ever wanted to put it back on for some silly reason. Antennas for the motherboard. These are brackets that were on the board originally for the AMD CPU, which we don't use. I don't think we use those. And I'm pretty sure these are replacements in here. The cooler instructions are right here, and I might want to give those a glance just to verify how this cooler goes on. And there should be some thermal compound in here. Oh, silly me. I've been kind of going over this box, but I wrote AIO on it. I wonder why I did that. All in one, that's our cooler. So inside this box is going to be another fan controller. We will need one of these. I don't think I need all three. We've got the spare parts for the hose clamps, which we will not use on this build because the hoses aren't visible to begin with. We have the Intel frame, and this is an AMD build, so we will not be using this frame. We've got the little card that has the L-Connect website to download the L-Connect software to control your RGB and the screen on the front of this cooler. We've got more screws, which really should go in the other thing, but I was kind of keeping the all-in-one parts away from the rest of it. And then these are the little rubber covers that go over the screws on the fans. For some of these fans, we cannot put these back on, but if they ever get moved into something else, likely they could just be thrown away. I mean, for what the fans cost, by the time you ever get around to moving them, they probably don't have much life left in them. But to each their own. But I know I had thermal compound in here. Oh, it's in this box right here. Wait, that's not thermal compound. There's a little tube of thermal compound somewhere. Is it in this one? Okay, I already had it out. So we'll go ahead and, again, even this bracket, it's unlikely we're going to take this off and switch it over to an Intel system. By the time we do that, the pump will be so old and it's already installed and customized into the case. I would have to effectively change the motherboard out at some point, put an Intel system in there, and that bracket will likely not fit a future Intel system because the sockets keep changing every few years. So the point of holding on to these extra parts probably doesn't make any sense. However, if it's not my system and I'm not the one paying for the parts, I leave that for the customer to decide. Customer may only be confused. What do I need this for? I tell them you don't. You bought them, they're yours. When you buy a pre-built computer, you don't get all the spare screws. You don't typically get all the spare stuff. The person who builds the machine typically keeps that. Most people don't know the difference. All right, so we'll get our thermal compound out. And then we've got this bracket here. And what this looks like, there's no screws on this. This just looks like a cover, maybe to hide or to beautify the base so you don't, you see how these screws stick up? These silver screws? I think that just, see where the cutout is, that's where your hoses are gonna go. I think that just fits over them as a decorative cover. I'm okay with that. It's gonna make everything look white so you won't have this unsightly silver. No contrast. And then of course we've got our fan controller, which we're gonna have to use. And I'm kind of curious how many optional fan plugins we can plug into this, because we need 3. Let me see. My first time using this fan controller, I've never seen one before. I like that they've given us some double-sided sticky tape, because you're going to have to affix this fan controller somewhere on your computer, preferably out of sight. And you don't want it floating around in there, because as you move the computer around, the cables could get disconnected. I wish there was like a 2.5-inch drive bay or something that this could fit in optionally, where it would secure down the same as a 2.5-inch SSD. But no, they just give you some double-sided sticky tape, which is fine. I mean, you're likely never going to move it. There have some plastic here. And you'll also notice there's a cutout or a recess right in the center. And I think that's the same exact size as the double-sided sticky tape. So you don't have to worry about, oh yeah, that locks right in there. So once we stick it in place, it shouldn't go anywhere. And you shouldn't worry about it being off center or on the wrong side. If for some reason you wanted to flip this over, you could. I do see 1, 2, 3, 4 plugs on this, and we need 1, 2, 3. I think we're good. I think that that's going to be the one fan controller. We don't need the other 2. We'll keep them as spare parts, but it seems unlikely we would ever need them unless we wanted to just buy the fans bare on a future build and use a controller we have in inventory. It's always an option. Now the cooler's brand new, so we don't have to clean it. It's got a piece of plastic covering the base. And that's to keep it free of any dust, dirt, debris, oils from your skin from handling it. And you don't want to remove that plastic cover until you're ready to install. So we want to put our thermal compound on first. But before I even get that far, I'm trying to figure out how is this going to mount on here. And just by looking at it, right, just by ascertaining from how it looks, we have 2 brackets here. And again, I'm not looking at any documentation, just here in the box. We've got these hose combs, I don't know, whatever you call them. And what these are going to do is they're going to clamp onto the hose and keep it looking pretty for us. It's too early to do that now. We have to wait until we get it installed and push the cables back and the hoses back. And then what this will do is this will keep the hoses nice and neat together through the glass. On the other side, they can go their own ways. Let's get rid of that and that. Then we've got these funky looking things here. And there are pre-installed screws on this bracket, which if I bring it up to the camera, I can show you. Kind of hard to see from a distance, but right in each corner, right there and right there, if I turn it around the other way, you can see the screws are already in there. And they're designed this way so that they lock in place. See how it's got like a little hex? That way you don't have to hold a screwdriver on one side and a ratcheter on the other side. It just holds itself in place. Now in theory, this should go right around our CPU, and it should only fit in one direction. My question is, how's that going to work? Let me see. You know what? I think this is for Intel. That's what I think. Because that, oh wait a minute, maybe it goes up and down. So for this, I will read the documentation because some coolers go on in a funky way. They're not all the same. Like usually most computer builds are so close to the same, and most cases are so close to the same. And every once in a while you get some weird part of the case, some corner of the case or side of the case that's different. But usually it's not the entire case from top to bottom. When it comes to mounting systems, a lot of the air coolers mount the same way, but the liquid coolers can mount very differently. And because I'm so accustomed to working with Intel here, I'm even more at a disadvantage because I have not worked on it near as many AMD systems. And they do mount differently from Intel systems, and that's why you get two separate parts, two separate bags of mounting parts. You will use one or the other, not both. So for this, I need to get out my glasses. And let's see what it says. For an AMD install, and this is not complicated, by the way, it's very simple. What we're looking at is essentially one page of directions printed on both sides. And it's mostly all pictures, which I'm good with because the English translation on some of this stuff. Never to press 2 times flexible. Got it. So if I'm just looking at the pictures, and I want to see the mounting for AMD, that usually right across the top of the sections, it'll say what it's for. Which socket of AMD, AM4, AM5, which socket of Intel. And this one says nothing so far, must be the back side. Apply thermal paste, okay. AMD platform backplate installation. Oh, that's interesting. Let me show this to you. See, now I would have never guessed this. We'd be here 3 hours before I figured this out. Oh no, it's more or less what I thought it would be. Never mind. I was looking at the, it looks like they've got the Intel backplate here, and then when I looked at this photo, it looked like they were attaching these underneath this bracket here, but that's not what's happening at all. I'm like, I would have never guessed that. Well, that's good, because that's not how you do it. I was on the right path here. Let's see what it says. This says Intel LGA 1700 on the left. Perform AMD backplate installation. Oh, it does go on the back. All right, so I'm here's where my confusion is. When you get an AMD motherboard, it's going to have a backplate already on it. And that backplate is this piece, this metal piece right back here. And what they're telling us in this documentation is they want us to remove, let me just see again. Pictures are a little hard to define. It says AMD backplate installation. See, that's where I'm getting thrown. But I don't see the back plate. The pictures are showing the top, not the back. This corner right here. It shows those brackets are going on the over the CPU, on the CPU side of the motherboard, not on the back plate. Then the other picture, this one right here, is Intel. So it's weird, there's no line separating these. So give me a second here while I'm trying to figure this out. Okay, so here's what they've done. I wish they would have drawn little lines. This looks like it's all one step, but if you look, it says this right here is LGA 1700. This is AMD. Then you get the little line right here, right? And then it says AMD sockets AM4 and AM5, then go on to these brackets. I'm trying to figure out where these brackets go. And now I understand. It finally just clicked with me. These brackets, when I brought this up earlier and I showed you how this top one doesn't move, that's what the water block secures onto, are the ones at the far corners, far ends. And then the holes in the center, or closer to the middle, I should say, these are what secure the bracket to the motherboard. So the bracket secures to the motherboard with the 2 inner holes, and the pump secures to the bracket with the pre-inserted screws. That's overall pretty straightforward. I think I'm a little PTSD and I'm overanalyzing everything now because my oversimplification from the previous parts has caused me some grief. So now I'm at a point now where it's relatively simple. And I'm like, hold on. I'm just flinching, like, oh, here it comes. So there should be a way to mount these then. According to this, they go above and below. So in other words, when you're looking at the motherboard on an AMD, and this varies depending on your mounting kit, this mounting kit is going to go across the top and across, you can't really see it, but across the top and across the bottom of the CPU socket. It will not go side to side as many Intel coolers do, or this might even do that on an Intel-based system. That's why I say it varies. And you know how one manufacturer does it compared to another one. So these inner holes right here, we need to secure this. And apparently I've got it upside down. So this is not the top. The way I'm holding it and showing it, this is the part that goes towards the motherboard. Okay? This part here that raises up, and these two wings that come out the sides, those have to face up. Everything looks upside down to me, but it makes sense. Because if I try and put it on this way, there's no way it's going to hit the bottom of the board. These get in the way. So these have to face up. And then the direction is also important. You'll notice that almost makes like a parentheses together. If I put them on the other way, then they're opposing each other. See what I'm saying? It doesn't look right. But sometimes they do go on that way. So do check and pay attention to the documentation. But ordinarily, these bend down towards the CPU or bend up towards the CPU on most cooler installations. So if I set that right over our back plate, it goes on like that. Right there, right there. And then I've got to use some screws to secure it. My question is, what screws do we use? I'm a poet and didn't know it. It wants us to use screws labeled 3. It says A. Okay, so what screw is A? So if we look back at the included parts list, this is often the first page of a cooler install manual. Many, like even a case, typically the first page of your manual is going to say, here's everything you should have got in the box. Before you begin, check and make sure you have all this. And we can see, how are they defining A? Well, here A says it's thermal paste, and the screw says it's either going to be D or K. But the instructions say the screws that we need to go into these slots is A. Hold on a minute, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know why Carrie doesn't read the manuals. Oh, they're so clear, aren't they? I'm sure I must be misunderstanding something here. Yeah, that's not an A, that's a 4. Time for Carrie to get new glasses. That is a 4. Okay, so let's see. I thought 4 was the quantity, but it's also the part number. Jesus, man. All right. No part number here says 4. They're all the parts are labeled with letters, and the 4 is the quantity. So what's the screws are which letter? I mean, they're telling us the quantity, 2. Well, I know it's going to take 2. That's not rocket science. And they tell us for each hole the total quantity, not for just that one hole. It says 2 in this hole and 2 in that hole. What? Wow. I'll tell you what I think they're doing here. I think they want us to reuse the screws on the brackets we took off. And I think that's why they're not mentioning the screw. That could be clearer. Again, I want to show you this documentation. is really open to interpretation. If you look, this is the way the motherboard arrives. There's nothing that indicates this to you, okay? But this is how your motherboard arrives. And they're telling you to take these screws out, and there's like a checkbox right there. Or is that a direction of which way you turn the screw? I don't know what that means. And then it's got a number 1, even though there's 4 of them. Well, it does say 2, and it does say 2. Then you come over here, it says to put the brackets on, and then it says 2, 2, 3. I don't know what's happening because the parts list, it's clearly not referring to the parts because the parts lists are all labeled as letters, not as numbers. Frustrating. So you get your part label, like these spacers are called F, and then down in the bottom right corner, it shows the quantity of how many of those you're supposed to have. That makes sense. Some coolers want you to reuse the screws that were holding the brackets in, and a lot of coolers say don't use those, use ours. But this looks like, again, from interpreting this documentation, there's no explanation. It's just a diagram. And the arrow, that little checkbox does seem to indicate which way they want you to turn the screw, which I don't understand because they're showing that same exact thing on the Intel system and you're not going to be reusing any screws on an Intel system. And on the Intel side, it does say use part E and use part F. But on the AMD side, there's no letters next to any of these parts. Oh, these are called part H, both of these. So if the screws they want us to use don't have a part letter next to them, I assume they just want us to reuse the ones that were there. That's fine. I just want to make sure I'm doing it right. So let me get back into the motherboard box. And again, this is an example of why we're not throwing away any old parts until we're absolutely done and everything's fine. Maybe even wait 30 days before you do anything like that. But we did take this little plastic bag and we took those original clips off so we could put our temporary cooler on. And that cooler didn't reuse any of these screws, for example. This one apparently does. Thank goodness for the documentation to make things so much clearer than if we just figured it out on our own. Because the alternative would be for me to just look at the parts that came with the cooler and look for some screws that kind of look like these that would fit, but maybe a little longer or a little shorter, or you know, they could have a little shoulder on them depending on the distance of the particular bracket. If the manufacturers all use the same bracket, they could sue one another for stealing their design. ASRock, who has probably been the most licensed cooler design, liquid cooler design, has sued so many companies. Just type in ASRock, A-S-E-T-E-K, lawsuit, and just read page after page of it. They go after almost every liquid cooler manufacturer for patent infringement. So if a manufacturer sticks to what's already there, you know, that came with the motherboard, it's not like the motherboard manufacturer is going to sue them. AMD's not going to sue them. But another cooler manufacturer just might. So you've got to make sure you got your own design or be willing to pay royalties. These companies want to collect royalties. Nobody wants to pay them. All right, so with that, I should be able then to secure this bracket, and I'll just use my electric driver. But again, I'm just explaining my entire thought process so you understand. You are not likely going to find yourself in the exact same position, but it won't matter what position you find yourself in. If you follow the critical thinking process, you'll be able to figure this out and be fully independent, which is a sense of pride for me. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, and you should ask questions. But if you've been doing this for years, I would hope year after year, you're asking fewer and fewer questions as you grow, and you're answering other people's questions. After 34 years, I should pretty well be asking questions fairly infrequently. And it becomes, after doing it for over 30 years, it's a pressure I put on myself. Like, you know, come on, Kerry, you can do this. There's a sense of pride there that may or may not be necessary unless a customer is right, right there watching you. I instinctively want to put these on this direction, and I have to remember they go on the other way. Gosh, that looks upside down to me, but that, when you think about it, it's the only way that makes any sense, so that that other bracket now will face up, and that way our water pump has something to secure to. Flipping it the other way, there's no holes for the screws on the block to screw into. So it does make sense when you think about it. Instead of just blindly following pictures, understand why are you putting it in that way? Why are we putting it in at the bottom and top of the CPU instead of side to side? Well, it ain't gonna fit, that's why. And why are we putting it on in this direction where these curves, that one's on backwards, isn't it? See, if you're not paying really close attention, can you see what I've done wrong here? I told you the curve on these brackets, they should face each other like forming two halves of a circle. So if you've got two that are facing the same way, your pump's not going to line up right because it's symmetrical. So one side of the screws isn't going to be longer and further away. Basically, all I have to do is turn this around this way. And that should be the proper orientation of that. But without paying really close attention and while I'm talking to you, it's an easy mistake any of us can make, and it's an easy mistake to fix. It just gets messy once you put your thermal compound on. You try to put, the block won't line up. Oh, I put the bracket on backwards. Now you got to, have the pump hanging there. Reverse the bracket around, which is not easy. It's not difficult. It's very easy. But try not to touch the thermal compound or it gets all over your hands and it's messy. That's why I've not put thermal compound down yet. So once again, these are the original screws that we took out, and we're just replacing the plastic brackets that were there. So don't worry about, don't be confused by the fact that we put this other cooler on which required no brackets at all. Again, some liquid coolers will go on in a similar way as that air cooler did. This one does not, and they're pretty common either way. There doesn't seem to me to be a preponderance of one installation method versus another on AMD. On Intel, it's more consistent with replacing the back bracket. On AMD's, you almost never replace this rear, not a bracket, but the plate back here, the black plate. Sometimes you do, but most of the time you're going to reuse that. On Intel, you don't have a back plate unless you're dealing with a socket 2011 or 2066. The high-end Xeon boards are the only ones that have back plates. And in those cases, those back plates don't come off. You basically, it's my understanding anyway, you just screw right onto that with whatever cooler. It's a very super easy cooler install. Air cooler, liquid cooler, they all install the same way. Right onto that Intel back plate, same screws, same everything. AMD, it could go 6 different ways. Now, before I put thermal compound on, let me make sure I'm right and that these are, in fact, these brackets are supposed to bend upwards and downwards towards each other by just seeing if the screws on the pump will align. The other thing you want to consider is where do you want your hoses coming out? I want my hoses coming out the top. Now, will a pump secure that way? Yeah, everything lines up beautiful. If I had my hoses coming out the right, it's going to cover up my RGB RAM. It's unsightly. The other thing is how much we can tie all these cables together so they also remain relatively hidden. They don't draw your eye from the case, because we want the eye to be drawn to the parts we want people to see. We don't want them to see all this other stuff. We want it to just blend in. So I verified alignment's okay. Now I put the thermal compound on. Then I can peel the plastic off the top of the screen. We'll leave that on for right now, so as we handle it, we don't leave our fingerprints and then we have to clean it. And then we also have a pull tab here for this plastic at the bottom of the cooler. Now, if your cooler has a piece of plastic you have to pull off, obviously there's no thermal compound on it. If this came pre-applied with thermal compound, it would have more of a plastic cover preventing the thermal compound from touching anything in the box. And it'll have a pattern or it'll be a square. and in which case you would just remove the cover, keep the cover on until you're ready to put the block on, then take the cover off. It's kind of the same thing. We're keeping the plastic here. The only difference is we're going to need to apply thermal compound. And I have no idea where to apply it on the block where it's going to line up with the CPU. You do not put thermal compound on both the block and the CPU. If your block comes with thermal compound on it, it's already the right amount in the right spot that lines up with the CPU. Leave the CPU clean. If you have a block that has no thermal compound, then you put your thermal compound on the CPU, leave the block clean. When you mate them together, they share. Otherwise, you're going to get way too much. Also, never mix two different thermal compounds. If you don't have enough thermal compound, you're putting it on your CPU and you run out, either use the exact same thermal compound to continue adding more, or wipe it off and buy a brand new tube of whatever you want, but do not mix them. It's just not going to work well. It'll work, it just won't work as well when you mix them. Scott's Lad says, it's snowing in Scotland. Did you get that?
Did I get that?
Yeah.
I sure did.
Snowing in Scotland.
Glad we're not there.
I know, right? Okay, so I guess thermal compound time, right? I get my nitrile glove here, which I set. I moved everything. Where did I put them? Oh, they're over here. All right. So I get a box of these. They're really cheap. And you don't have to do this. It's my method because I build so many systems. You can get a piece of cellophane, scotch tape. Use your finger. You can use one of those little spatula things, thermal paste spreaders. There's a lot of different ways to do this. It's not that big of a deal. It's not as precise. Let me rephrase. Neither method you use for applying thermal compound is really more precise than any other. You want to put a square dot in the middle, you want to make an X, you want to put a fancy design, you want to get a template that you spread the thermal compound over, it makes a pretty design like a corporate logo. ASUS will include this thing, you know. It's really a very wide gap of how much thermal compound is too little and too much. When it's too much, it's obvious. It'll make a mess and gush out on the sides. When it's too little, it's pretty obvious because your system's going to run hot. The good news is, between too little and too much, there is a massive middle. And as long as you fall, think of it like a gas tank. As long as the gas tank is between full and empty, as long as it's not quite at empty, your car runs exactly the same. So you've got that wide range between full and empty. Just don't let it get too full or it spills out onto the ground when you're fueling it up. And don't let it get too empty or you'll run out and the car just won't go anymore. Kind of the same. So when we put thermal compound down, it is not rocket science. You do not have to follow videos that say you must apply it. It's not that sensitive. This is consumer grade equipment, okay? So that kind of precision is not necessary. The reason I do it my way, and I've developed this over years of trying to figure out the best way to do it. And that's because I want to make sure the entire surface of the top of the CPU is covered evenly. There are no bare spots. And I will dab on it with my finger to create little hills and valleys when I'm finally done. And that will prevent any sort of air bubbles. Not that that really matters, but just to appease and pander to the people who think that matters, that will resolve that issue, and it's no big deal to do it. So what I'm going to do, and normally you want to do this with the case lying flat, but I'm just going to put some of this thermal compound on here. Now usually the manufacturers give you at least 2 applications worth of thermal compound in a tube. Some are more selfish than others, or you might decide you want to spend a lot of money on an expensive thermal compound. The difference between thermal compounds is not how much they cool. I can buy the cheapest thermal compound on the market, and I can buy the most expensive thermal compound on the market. I can apply them, test them for highest heat, do that back and forth. You will find there is no difference between them. If you see a difference of 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, it's because your room temperature is changing. It's not because of the thermal compound. Well, then the expensive thermal compound is a waste of money? Not necessarily. The thermal compound that's more expensive won't dry out, or at least that's the idea behind it. It will stay effective for a longer period of time. The cheap stuff, this will dry out in a couple of years. The really cheap stuff might dry out in a year. The expensive stuff might not dry out for 15 years. If you're somebody who's taken your CPU off all the time, you probably want to use something called a thermal pad. They don't generally cool as well, but they're less messy and you can reuse them over and over and over again. For most of us, building once, don't go over the top with thermal paste. This is probably fine. This can be called thermal grease, thermal paste, thermal compound. They have a lot of different names for it. And all I'm trying to do here is finger paint the top of the CPU so that I can't see the silver top anymore. That's as thick as we need it. And I want to make sure there are no bare spots. Think of it like painting a wall in your house, right? You don't want to have a patch or an area of the wall that the paint didn't cover. So that's why I refer to this as finger painting. It's the same idea that what I'm trying to do is paint, but I'm using thermal compound. I don't want to put too much paint on. But if I put too little on, you're going to see right through it, right down to what I'm trying to cover with the paint. And this thermal compound, it's not spreading as nice as I would like, so I'm going to put some more on there. If I put too much on, the way I get rid of the excess is simply by taking a clean finger of the glove and wiping it off with the finger. So I'm going to just continue on, and because I still have new paint, if you will, to cover areas here, I'm going to continue to use the one finger that has the spare thermal compound collecting on it and try to transfer it back onto the top of the CPU. And I do feel like this thermal compound is definitely a little older. It should be a little bit more, what's the word? Viscous. Now, when thermal compound heats up, it will become viscous. At least it should. And you'll never see that because that'll be underneath your heatsink and you won't see how it's become much more pliable. Here in Arizona, when our temperatures are over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, this probably would spread easier, to be honest. On the other hand, a more expensive thermal compound might not have this issue for a very long period of time. So probably better to go a little too much than to ever go too little. And effectively, all I'm trying to do is just dab with my finger. Once I've got the whole surface of the heatsink covered, dab on my finger to create these little hills and valleys. And it should look even from top to bottom, from left to right. There should be no puddles or mountains of thermal compound or level differences. They should all sort of be the same. And by dabbing on it, there's going to be this kind of ridges I'm creating. When we put the heatsink on, or the water pump on, it's going to squish that down and flatten it out. If I had to guess, I'd say I put a little too much on, but not enough that it should cause anything to run out the sides. That's when it's way too much. A little too much is good. A little too little is bad. And just the right amount won't matter. It won't cool any better versus just the right amount to too much, because too much is going to squeeze out. That's a problem that solves itself, but it creates a new problem with the mess, especially when you're going for a certain look of your computer and this stuff is oozing out and you can see it through the glass and you're like, oh, looks like it's bleeding to death. It's definitely not a good look. Having done that, now we can, ideally, we'll set this onto its side. And let me move the fan controller. We're not quite ready for that yet. Watch your water block when you do this because you don't want it to fall over and slam into your RAM or damage your brand new components. So be very gentle. Take your time and enjoy your build. And work with gravity as much as you can. A lot of times when I'm showcasing these builds, I'm doing it in a way that's best for the camera to pick it up. But unless the camera's behind me, I either have to work backwards, which I would never do in real life, or Yeah, not my best thermal compound application. Sorry, looking at it down now, I see areas I've missed. I think we're okay though, because there's enough that, so the whole point of me doing it with my finger is so I can cover the entire surface. But now that I've laid it down, I see the little edges that stick out on an AMD CPU are lacking a little bit of thermal compound. They don't really get hot there, they get hot in the middle. But the thermal compound that I do have on there, as I mentioned, I might have put a little too much on there, is actually in my benefit now, because that gives it an area to spread out to, and it should fix itself. So we're good. Now I'm going to peel this tape off. I don't remember what I was talking about before. Typical. I want to make sure the hoses are going to face up, because that's the look I want. But sometimes on some coolers, you cannot orient the hoses in whatever direction you want. Typically, the hoses go towards the RAM on most builds. I don't want that on this build. Intel CPUs are completely square. AMD CPUs, I never thought of it this way. Intel CPUs are rectangular, but their coolers are always perfectly square. And because the coolers are always perfectly square, you can orient them in any of 90 degrees, right? Top, side, bottom, left. AMD CPUs are square, but they go into a rectangular socket. So typically AMD CPU coolers, they go on up or down. They don't go on left or right. Or they go on left or right, but they don't go on up or down, depending on the manufacturer. Again, they don't want to sue each other. But you can't generally put on an AMD cooler in a 90-degree options. So I guess this cooler manufacturer thought of this, and they, Lian Li, wanted these hoses to be up. That's probably why I didn't have any difficulty with that. That's my guess. Now, when it comes to tightening everything down, we really want to tighten everything down as evenly as possible on the block. And the reason for that is we want the surface of the CPU and the surface of the water block to be level. And if you tighten down one side and then the other side, there's a good chance it's warped, and you can't see it. You can't look underneath there. And it may be warped ever so slightly that one side is making contact and the other one's just a ½ millimeter away from making contact. And you'll say, you know, I put my cooler on it. My CPU's running hot. That would suggest to me you did not put your cooler on straight. And one of the best ways to avoid that is to simply start each opposite corner. Don't tighten them too far, or it'll be difficult to get the other screws started. Once you've created that downward tension, then you come over to a side that hasn't been tensioned yet, and it'll never bite. You have to really push down on it to get it to bite. And then we just want to go from corner to corner. It doesn't have to be precise, but generally you just want to try to evenly go from one corner to the other. Give it a few turns. Jump to another corner. And again, it doesn't have to be so precise, but you definitely want to give it your best effort. The lazy thing would just be to get an electric screwdriver, tighten down one, and as soon as you go tighten down the other one, it's already pressured down one side and it won't go down the other side. So you're just making your life harder. I'm surprised how far these screws are turning. This is quite unusual that they go in this deep. But again, that's the way this cooler manufacturer wanted to do it. So what am I going to do? Tell them they're wrong? But it just feels like it's spinning. It doesn't really feel like it's biting in. But I have to assume it is. I mean, eventually, there we go. That one bottomed out. Now we'll go to the other corner. Let's bottom this one out. And then we'll go to the next corner. Now that we've got them so far in. Now, if you're ever unsure, you don't necessarily have to take the whole cooler off. Once you've tightened down all the screws, if you feel like, I don't know if I warped it, just back the screws out about 2 or 3 turns, all 4 of them, and then turn one turn, go to the opposite corner, and do that one turn at a time until they tighten. That kind of precision should not be necessary, as long as you at least make the effort in your best judgment to say, yeah, that one's about that far down, or I turned, like I wasn't counting my turns, I was just feeling for it or doing it based on time. I feel like I've turned that for about 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Let's move to the next one, turn it for 2 or 3 seconds. And I feel like my turning speed and the distance that my wrist goes is more or less the same. Again, it doesn't have to be that precise. Now I'm going to take the plastic cover off the screen. Wow, that was on there good. And we'll put this little rubber grommet back on. So the cooler installation overall is quite simple. The radiator installation, however, a little more complex than I've ever had to deal with before, but once I realized why, having that experience, if I had to do it again, it really wouldn't be any big deal. It was just that first time. The fact that I struggled so much on that first time means that lesson's probably going to stay with me a while. So if I ever decide to buy another cooler, I might choose another one of these because now I'm familiar with it. And so any future installation on a future build, I'm going to make it look super easy. And that's the problem with editing, is we can make anything look easy on camera. The first time you rode a bicycle, you probably fell off of it. And the more you rode it, you probably got to a point where you could just take your hands off the handlebars. Right? But that wasn't something you did right away. It was something you gained through familiarity and experience. And in much the same way, that's pretty much most things in life. And now if I pick this back up like so, now we do have these combs here, and I guess the idea behind these is that we can put these back here like this, right? Snap the hose in this clip, and then this cable can also go in this clip. And we can do that with the next clip. We can take this, just make sure these hoses are kept straight, put them on the back end where the viewer doesn't, when you're looking through the glass, you don't really see them. That's a nice touch. I like that. And you can slide them up or down. And again, this particular wire here, you know, we could run it more towards, you know, the right side or the left side, either way, whatever your personal preference is. And that helps keep your cabling nice and tidy without using cable ties. It also makes it very workable with regards to, you know, moving it around. Now this is our standard power cable. Usually modern motherboards will have a CPU fan header and an AIO header. This is an all-in-one pump. So if one of your fan headers up here says water pump or AIO, that's for a liquid cooler. That means it doesn't speed up or slow down. You always want your pump running at full speed. It's the fans blowing through the radiator that should speed up or slow down, but the pump should be pumping the fluid the same regardless. So that's why you don't want to plug it into a fan header. If you do plug it into a fan header, then you want to make sure you go in your BIOS and say, we want full speed at all times. Let's see here. So we've got, it says right on here, CPU fan is here, CPU fan 2 is here, and this gray one says AIO pump. So we want to be on this gray one. And then we can also find a clever way to hide this cable. I'm not worried about that right now. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I can just put it back here. But I can clean this up a lot of different ways. I could run this cable, for example, back through here. So a lot of different creative ways you can do your cable management, and then just poke it back out right there. Now, if you had a rear connector motherboard, I think this case will support that as well, and that'll move all your cables except those to the back. Actually, it might move those to the back, but you're still going to have your hoses exposed. Hose exposed, exposed hose. And then we can adjust this to where we feel like, you know, if the cable's buckling at all or showing. You know, once it's there, nobody's going to move it. And then that's what it's going to look like. Now we still have to apply power to the fans, and that means we're going to use our Lian fan controller. Now the fan controller came with the first kit of fans. The fan controller came with the second kit of fans. Why are there two kits? The fans at the bottom, as a reminder, these fan blades are on the opposite way. So the fans still spin the same direction as these and these, but those down there are going to be bringing air in because the fan blades are reverse direction. You think, well, couldn't they just run the motor the other way? It doesn't quite work as well that way. So we have all of our fans rotating the same direction, and only the orientation of the blades has changed. That way, these fans are blowing air out. These fans are blowing air out. I do not want the fans on the bottom blowing air out, but if they were regular fans and we put them down there, that's what they'd be doing. So we put the reverse blade fans down there so they bring air in, so the air is going to come in from the bottom. It'll cool any graphics cards you've got there, and the air will go out through the back, and it'll go out through the back this way and this way. Make sense? You want your airflow all moving in one direction. We don't want airflow hitting each other, and then you have a dead spot in the middle, which is likely the hottest part of your computer. That's why putting too many fans in your computer can cause your computer to run hotter. Now, looking at this, we have an ARGB header, and we have a USB plug, and we have what looks like a fan header for some reason. I don't know why. Oh, that's probably for power. That would be my guess. Maybe power. See, these fans, when you start dealing with RGB fans and a lot of fans, I hope you like cable management. Now, Lian Lee's done a lot to help us with that. Because essentially what it appears, take a look here. We need to, hold on a second, let me undo my wire tie back here. We've got this fan header that's going to provide power and RGB to these two rear fans, and we should be able to plug that in anywhere we want right here. All right, so just for now, I'm not really thinking this through, but these are easy to move around. There's one. We've got the fans at the bottom, those reverse blade fans. That's right here. We'll plug those in just like so. Then on this side, we have to plug in the water block. So the water block is going to plug in exactly the same. That's the benefit if you buy all the same manufacturer of RGB fans. They're not only going to look and spin the same, but you can use fewer fan controllers. On the big Cougar build, we've got 3 different fan controllers. One for the Cougar pump, one for the Lian Li Strimer cable, and we've got one for the case, Cougar's own case. Cougar's own case does not use the same fan controller as Cougar's water block. I don't get that. But then there's this piece, and this kind of threw me, but it occurs to me we never applied power to these fans. So if you remember, you just use one cable, and then the fans connect together. They link up in a series. And at one end or the other, you will attach this one cable. And I had decided I wanted to attach the cable down at the bottom, and now I'm wondering how I'm going to get to it. But I think it should be relatively simple if I feed this cable in through this grommet right here. You see where I'm coming out? Right there. I should be able to get up underneath of this somehow. I haven't really thought this one through. Probably should have did that earlier in the build, because without that, these fans will not spin. So for the sake of just getting this up and running quickly, I'm going to do that later, and we'll just temporarily hook it to the top. The cabling on this, it probably isn't going to make that much of a visual difference. So for right now, see, I can come right up through here. And this is so easy to connect. I just slide this on here. does it go on the other way? Murphy's Law goes on the other way, right? Of course it does. So even if I were to pin that down, I could keep it there. You'd probably barely notice it. But if I move it to the bottom, you won't see it at all. But I won't do that right now because that means I have to pull the radiator back out to get up underneath. Because, well, the radiator hits the bottom of the case. The fans don't. I think there's just enough room. But that's a refinement or a polishing I can do off camera. For now, you could leave it like this too. It just depends how finicky you are. Now we've got the rest of the fan controller, and that's going to mean hooking up what appears to be just a regular fan controller header and an ARGB header. This is going to come off your motherboard. This way you can control the RGB that's on your motherboard with your motherboard software. This is an ASRock board, and ASRock has a trademark name for their RGB. Like Asus has Aura, MSI has their whatever, ASRock has theirs. You don't have to do it this way, but it makes life so much easier to use one piece of software. Since you're talking to the same controller, you don't have to download some third-party RGB controller software like we did on the Cougar build. Or you have to configure each piece of software separately, and they may not synchronize the same. This makes life so much easier. And so, well, it might cost you more to stick with a specific brand. Like these Lian Li fans weren't cheap. You're going to see they look much better than if we use the cheaper fans. Depending on how important that aesthetic is to you, just set your expectations accordingly. So if I look on the motherboard for a fan header and an ARGB, we can go down here behind the fans where no one can see the cables. And again, I'm going to clean this up a little bit later anyway. But if I run these cables, let's see, I'm going to run them right underneath the motherboard here, behind the power supply. And this one cable can plug into literally any fan header on the board. And then you probably have one, if not two, ARGB headers on your board, depending on how old your board is. If your board's old enough, you won't have any. This board appears to have two, one at the bottom and one up by the power cable. But they are meant to be strung together, so you shouldn't really need more than one. You can also go on Amazon and buy a splitter if you run out of them, but essentially the ARGB, just to keep it out of sight, and I don't know why they made the cables black instead of white. I wish they were white. And it does look like I've sort of caused myself a little grief there by overlapping the cables. I had this cable coming out on the right and the fan cable coming out on the left, and so when I went to put this one on, it crossed over. That's unsightly. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Right over here is an ARGB header. The good thing is these won't fit anywhere that isn't the right plug. So you don't have to worry about plugging it into the wrong plug because it just simply won't go on. Now I know you can't see anything because the fans are in the way, but that's the idea, right? And the idea is the fans are supposed to hide this. Now had I waited and put the fans in last, you would have seen this just fine, and I'd have a little bit more room to work in. Maybe good to know for next time. But it's not a deal stopper. It's just would have made my life just a little bit easier to do things in a different order. Sometimes we do things here what makes sense for filming. Although I can't tell you that I wouldn't have just done it that way in that order anyway. I don't know. But having never worked with this case before, it's certainly something I'll remember. If I work with this case again, I will build it in a different order for that reason. What I like about what I do is, you don't have to do it in a specific order. Sure, one order may be more efficient. One order may be easier. But as long as your end result is the same, how you got there, what route you took to get to your destination, is entirely up to you. It's your freedom to choose. Now, when you start doing it for a living and you're you're charging a customer by the hour, that's when things start to matter about efficiency. I'm having just a little bit of a difficulty lining these pins up because I can't see the holes they go in. It's just typical of an ARGB header. I always struggle with these. I'm going to turn it my way so I can just see a little better what I'm doing here. Like that feels like it wants to go in, but it should not be difficult for you to push this on. If it's pushing back or it won't go any further, don't force it. Take a step back, think about what you're doing for a second, and try a different approach. Try a different alignment or a different angle, because once I line it up correctly, it should just fit like a glove. And I don't know why I'm always struggling with these every single time. Like, how is everybody else doing this where, like, it feels like the holes are there, but they're obviously not, or this would have slipped on. There's no alignment pins on this. There's no keys or anything like that that can help you reassure you you're on the right elevation and horizontal. So what ends up happening is these pins can get stuck into the sides of the holes they're supposed to go in, and you can bend the pins. And sometimes it's hard to tell if I got it too far to the left, if I got it too high up, too far to the right, too far down. It'd be nice, like on the fan headers that we plug our case fans in and CPU fan, there's a guide. You can't really screw up. It only goes in one way, and it auto aligns itself according to the guide, just like your RAM modules do. This has no guide. It's just raw pins sticking out. And the holes that we're trying to find, they're recessed into the plug that I've got in my fingers, so they're hidden behind a shroud, and I can't see them. So it's definitely something I have to feel for. Okay, that did go on, but it was really, really tight. They're not normally that tight, and that bothers me when they're not normally that tight, because they could just fall right off. The tighter it is, the better, but the more uncertain I am that I've got it aligned, and if I push too hard, I could bend the pins. They really need to do something with, some kind of an alignment for that. Now, finally, looking at the other side of this fan controller, we have what appears to be a regular USB 2 cable, and this weird plug that looks like it goes into PCIe of a power supply like a graphics card would use. Why? That's how we're getting power to this? We're not just using SATA? Huh. I wonder why. So this is like a 12 volt plug and a SATA is a 5 volt plug. Maybe that's why. Well, anyway, I know this is USB 2, so we'll go ahead and plug the USB 2. But you could see we have a spider of cables coming off of one fan controller. So imagine on the Cougar build, we have 3 different fan controllers. That's a lot of cable management. And it's a lot of double-sided sticky tape to try and figure out where you could put these fan controllers where you don't see them, but they're also not in the way of closing the panel in the back. And these are the challenges of RGB, which has very little to do with actually building a computer. This is something relatively new in the last 6 years, 7 years, that is just getting more and more out of control. We're basically building lamps now. Fancy lamps. Did not know that was the career I was getting myself into when I started this in the 90s. But behind all the flashy lights and unnecessary cabling that goes with it, we still have the computer, which is what we were supposed to be building to begin with. And now it's more about glass cases. We never had glass cases. Are you kidding me? Who the heck wants to look at it? So never saw this trend coming, and I would have never thought it would get this popular. You find me a computer repair shop that says we love RGB. You find me a customer that says we love paying to pay somebody to put this RGB in, because it's a lot more time consuming and therefore a lot more labor involved. And then that means it's going to cost more money and it's going to take longer to do. And it's a stupid reason to call for a repair. Hey, Carrie. Yeah, how can I help you today? You having a problem? Yeah, I can't get my fans to turn colors. Okay, so let me just stop everything I'm doing and jump right over there for you. Like, I'm used to, hey, our system is down, none of our customers can be helped. Our employees are on the clock, but they're not able to get any work done. Our customers are yelling at us, we need you over here now. That's what I'm used to. So calling me because my color isn't changing on my fan, or my fan won't light up. I don't know, just feels a little frivolous. Now, this one last power connector, it appears to be a 12 volt power connector off a power supply. And we still have to hook up the power supply cables anyway, so this is a good time to address this. Let me move my cable ties here, or wire ties. And we still have thermal compound left over. You might as well keep it. You never know. Now, if there isn't enough in here, I don't know what brand this is. So unless you've got a number of these coolers that all came with the same, if you don't have enough of this, and you realize that when you're applying, what you had left isn't enough, wipe it clean and start with a new tube, or start with a tube that has enough in it. Do not mix them. I cannot stress that enough. Mixing them is as bad in many cases as not putting any thermal compound down it now at all. You could be doing the opposite of cooling your CPU. It's entirely possible. Now, the fan control. Oh, I guess that would be in our documentation, wouldn't it? Right? Because the fan controller came with the cooler. Oh, that's interesting. Apparently, those little combs I put on the hoses, yeah, maybe not. It looked like it was saying you could screw that down, the clamp, and push the hoses towards the back. That's a pretty extreme. And then that little this decorative piece, this just slips over magnetically, so you don't see the screws. Very clever. And I don't see the fan controller mentioned in here. Oh, cable connection guide. Don't plug your ARGB into a 12 volt out. 12. Gee, you think? Okay. Yeah, this does to connect the power connector on the fan controller to a PCIe connector. Okay, I've never seen that before. That's a new one for me. So, with that in mind, let me grab my power supply cables. We're so close to firing this up for the first time. We'll get in here. There's our power cable. I don't know why the bag is in a bag that's in a box that was shipped in a box, so that we can have another bag, another 2 bags. They've given us some cable ties and some black screws. And I usually just take the power cable. I'm not going to use this power cable, but for the customer or whatever, I'll take it out of the bag. And we'll keep it back in this other bag. Put bags in bags, man. So we've got our PCIe connectors here, and it appears motherboard connectors here. And then this bundle appears to be all Molex and SATA. We don't have anything Molex or SATA on this build, so I shouldn't need any of that bundle. I shouldn't need this. I won't use any of these, but they don't necessarily need to stay included here. So we're not going to be using any black screws on this build anyway. At least none that are visible from the outside of the case. We're looking at that level of aesthetic, right? The color of the screw matters. Now, when we look at the included cables on our Thermaltake, what they want us to do is they want us to use what is essentially a graphics card power cable or a PCIe power cable, not to be confused with CPU power. So that's a PCIe cable. See how it's got the two ends on one end? This end goes into the computer. They effectively want us to use one of those. You usually get a couple of these. Some power supplies will give you one that only has one end on it, which is nice, and you don't have the excess when you're in a situation like this. Our excess is going to be running behind. You won't see it anyway. This one says CPU on it, so it looks identical, but this is strictly for the CPU. This is different than PCIe. They look identical, except the PCIe cables, they generally have the last two pins separated so that you can have 6 or 8, and the CPU are separated into two 4s, 4 but 4. They do look alike. This one gives us 2 CPU connectors. That's a nice touch, because I do believe this board has 2 on here. Now, unless you're overclocking, you usually only have to use the first one. But if you've got it, no harm in using it. Wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to purchase a power supply intentionally that had 2 connectors, unless I was building Threadripper or something like that, where it's not an option. And then I guess, I don't know how we're supposed to feed that through. They didn't really give us enough room here. That's interesting. There is a plug that comes out right here, and I suppose we can just feed it through here. Probably will look identical anyway, as far as looks go. And I appreciate that they've given us the plug. And then when we fold that down far enough, you'll barely see it. And then that's going to go right to the back of our power supply, right back here, from here to here. So you'll never see this cable. It'll all be back here. I like that. That's a nice clean look and easy to work on. Typically, you got to have one or the other. And then here on the back of the power supply, it says CPU 6 plus 2 PCIe. That wouldn't be 6 plus 2. That would be 4 plus 4. Oh, okay. So the back of this power supply is a little confusing, because instead of it's got 2 CPU plugs in the back of the power supply, and instead of them being side by side, one is above the other. But what's to the right are similar looking plugs, and those are for graphics cards, or what we call PCIe power. It's quite confusing. Don't care for that layout. But I'm going to use the one that says CPU that's closest to the bottom of the power supply, and leave the part that's closest to me available for future upgrades. I don't have to work behind the cables I installed earlier. Just thinking ahead. And then we've got one of our PCIe cables here. Doesn't matter which one you use. And that can go into any of the slots that say PCIe. I guess on the back of this motherboard, you can use either PCIe or the CPU power cable in these plugs. I've never seen that before. It just matters which cable you use. You cannot connect this cable to your motherboard. This only goes into a graphics card, or in this case, this controller. There may be some other peripherals I'm not aware of, but if you try and fit this into your motherboard, it's not going to fit right. And if you force it to fit, I hope you have a fire extinguisher. Okay, so it looks like we can use either one, so that's fine. That gives me some peace of mind here. Typically, the cable should slide right in. There should be no struggle. If you're struggling, you're doing it wrong. And then finally, right here, well, it's not finally, but this step is to give our fan controller the power it needs. And I'm so glad we only have to deal with one fan controller and not 3. So now the fan controller can power those fans. Actually, yeah, the fan controller powers those fans. And then each of these connects magnetically to the fans, and each fan connects to the other fan. It's very clever. I like this. So this cable we're not going to use. It is possible that if we get a video card that requires 3 connectors or 4 connectors, now we only have 2 left because we just used one on our fan controller. But the power supply here also has the 20-pin connector, which is often used on, it's the, what do they call it, ATX3 connector or something? That's used on the newer, more modern graphics cards. They give you either option. It may also be possible to buy an adapter to go from that 20-pin back into a spare one of these. Or you can go online and buy extras, but make sure you get the extras from Thermaltake or that they're official Thermaltake cables. These are not interchangeable between power supply manufacturers, and they may not even be interchangeable between power supply models from the same manufacturer. They'll fit, but when the smoke comes out, you realize you bought the wrong cable. That's the downside of modular cables for power supplies. One of the many downsides. Okay, I need to hook up motherboard power, so that's the big connector here. So let me spin this back around. And we're going to go on right here. The clip always goes towards the outside edge. And then we're going to run these cables right out through this closest wiring grommet here. It's a bit of a tight fit, but the tighter the fit is, the cleaner the look is going to be. And as we run those through the back, right here, then they're going to plug into our power supply right back here. So everything's very easy to get to. Once again, the order in which you plug things in doesn't really matter. If I were to plug into the back of the power supply first. Whatever your heart desires is the way you should do it, or you can follow along with us either way. Pretty hard to screw it up, but if anybody can, you're looking at them. Now I'm just going to plug the motherboard power in. So the big connector only plugs in one place on the back of the power supply. There's nowhere else this will fit. Same is true with the other end. It only plugs in one place on the motherboard. It would be very difficult for you to get that wrong. So there's one, and I don't know why they split the motherboard power connector into two on one side, you know, two connectors on one and one connector on the other. You'd think it'd be one on both sides, but whatever, it's not a big deal. Just an observation. And then finally we have our front port umbilicals. That's our front USB, power cable, hard drive LED, power LED, and then any front audio as well. So those are all back here, neatly tied up where it says Vision. That's all behind the power cables now, but you could have seen it earlier behind this Velcro tie. I'm not going to worry about making it look pretty right now. I just want to get the cables out of there. And these are very, very easy to hook up. They're pretty much the same on all motherboards. Same connectors. They generally go in the same spot unless you're dealing with a mini ITX board. So we've got, what is this? HD audio, USB 3, 3.1, and I should have my unified connector here for power. I love that. Our front panel connector is just one. You can't really see it, can you? It's just one connector, one unified connector. Just plug it right on the front of the board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that down because this has to come in from underneath the board. And it's got one pin missing, so you can't put it on wrong. So in our case, where the connector says F panel on top of the plug that's in my hands, I just align it. So in other words, the missing pin is on the top right. And I know you can't see anything, but trust me, I can barely see anything at this point. I'm just trying to get the connector to align with the pins. Make sure you get it on both rows of pins, not just one row of pins. And you'll know because it won't fit on there correctly. It should have a little resistance. I have to grab a flashlight and look at this because I can't quite, the fans are a little in my way. Again, maybe save the bottom fans for last. Or I could not be lazy and take 2 screws out and remove those fans. Because the whole the whole bracket those fans screw onto, it's just 2 screws and it pops right off. But I also don't think it's that big of a deal, you know, to simply attach these connectors around the fans. It's just my personal preference to try and leave everything as is and not do any more work than I have to, which sometimes causes me to have to do twice as much work. That's all right. At the end, I did it my way, and that's the important thing. And you can do yours your way. All right, this is our front panel audio, and I will put that. Also, the missing pin is on top. Is that right? Yeah, missing pin is on top. So I like that because the connector, I think it only has, yeah, it only has wording on top of the connector. So if I put the connector on upside down, I can't see what it is, even though I know what it is. But nonetheless, what's the point of putting writing on it if the writing faces the ground? So let's see if I can get this aligned. Here we go. That's our front port audio and our front panel connector. Finally, we just have the USB, right? We've got this USB here and this USB here for the Type-C connector on the motherboard. And we just want to run these, you know, probably, I would guess I would run this right underneath our power cable through the same grommet. Once again, this is going to be very difficult for you to see, but it's going to go right underneath the power cable. And then the USB Type-C cable is exactly the same. It goes into the next connector on this board, the next one down. So we're going to route the same cable route through the same grommet, just a little lower. And then this just pops in. It'll snap in. If it doesn't go in smoothly, turn it 180 degrees and try again. You'll know it when you get it right. You should not have to struggle or force it. You'll just click in there. And that's effectively our build. At this point, we should be able to put power, video, and a keyboard and mouse on it. And Ethernet too, if we want. We should be good to go. You guys think it's going to work? Did the fans we bought used from Amazon, are they going to work? Are you coming out for this?
I am. I'm so excited.
All right, well, let's see. Let's make sure the power supply is in the off position. I will grab my cane. My power cable. And we'll plug that in. I need a keyboard and a mouse, which I have right here, of course.
It's so clean.
Oh, wait till you see it with the panels on it. All right, so we're going to set that down, and then we'll plug anywhere into any of the USBs back here for the wireless dongle. I need an HDMI, and we'll plug Ethernet in too. So HDMI into the capture card right here. This is all live and unscripted, so what's going to happen, and I can't control what's going to happen, folks.
Don't let the magic smoke out.
Don't let out the, what about the Pixie server dust?
Magic server pixie dust.
Magic, no, server magic.
Magic server pixie dust.
What's magic about the server?
That was the commercial.
IBM used to have a commercial for businesses that aired during regular television.
You just sprinkle your magic server pixie dust and boom, you got a data center.
I got to get me some of that.
Right.
Little server pixie dust. All right, so where's my power button on this? Do you see it?
Well, I don't have my glasses on. But
Well, I shouldn't need glasses to see a power button. It's
right there.
it's right up here.
Yeah.
So if I hit that, oh, maybe turn the switch on the power supply,
Yeah. That one.
then hit that. Is that power or is that reset?
That's
Oh,
power.
there it goes.
Yeah, that's power.
1 fan, 2 fan, 3 fans. Okay, RAM
4, 5,
just lit
6.
up. Those fans should light up too, though. Oh, our screen on our cooler is lit up.
Oh, ooh.
There we go.
I'm so excited.
You're-
Ooh, it's beautiful. Wow. Holy crap.
Why are the fans so loud?
My goodness, that is gorgeous.
Gorgeous. All right, let's switch over to camera 2 input here, which is our capture card. Oh, it's already in Windows. Now, likely the reason the fans are so loud is we probably have to put some software in, the L-Connect software. So why don't we do that now, because that's way too loud.
That is pretty.
Is it purdy?
Pretty.
Okay, so I'm going to put my glasses back on, and we're going to type in.
I love it.
It is so loud. We're going to type in over here. Let's see, let me go full screen on camera 2 so as I can seize. There we go. You're going to take a picture of that?
Oh my gosh, yes.
All right, thumbnail maker.
That is amazing. Truly beautiful.
All right, I'm going to put in L-Connect. I should need to use that little card. First link should take us right to the page for what we want. This should be able to control our screen on the water block as well as our fan RGB. Download L-Connect 3, that's what I want. Install, oh, we haven't even put the Strimer on. Please ensure you shut down and reboot the system. What are you talking about? Oh, for firmware. Okay, that's cool. Where's my download though? LCD, TL series, whatever. I'm not reading any of that. That's called a manual. Our download's pretty fast here. This is 500 megs, 510 megs. It's a pretty sizable piece of RGB software. Now, while we could use the RGB software that the motherboard includes, it will not give us the controls for the LCD screen on the block. Usually you've got to use the cooler manufacturer's software that imports the photos or whatever graphics you want displayed on your water block. And then as soon as that finishes installing, give that just a second. Yeah, there's no reason those fans should be that loud. So it just must be a default. So the USB cable that we hooked up is from the cooler, is what, actually it's from the fan controller, is how we communicate with the RGB and fan RPMs with the fan controller. It's through the USB cable. If yours doesn't have a USB cable, you have no way to communicate with it. So we'll let that install. If your system is loud, you likely have a misconfigured fan curve in your BIOS, or maybe you've set your fans up as PWM when they should be set up as DC, or the other way around. And you can go into your BIOS and make those changes. Sometimes the changes take effect immediately when you make them in the BIOS. Other times you have to reboot and just play around with it until you can hear it quiet down. But the only time you want it to get loud is when it's actually working. If it never gets loud, then you've done the exact opposite. Hey, the fan's just now quieted down as the software has completed, which means the software defaults automatically address this. So we're going to restart the PC, and you're going to see in real time how fast this machine is. You know, it's one thing to look good. It's another thing to have high performance. This does both, or at least it better. So here we go. Now you can see, without me interacting much with the chat room today, this still took a good hour and a half to just finish this up. The system is not turning itself back on, which is weird. Didn't it say it was going to restart? It looks like it just powered itself off. So I'm going to reach over and hit the power button now. Let's see. There we go. Just turning it on. And we should get a boot screen here in just a second. So if you were measuring the speed of the boot time, here we go. Oh, the fans are much quieter. RGB just came on. Fans have cranked up a little bit. And we're at the desktop. Now we should see the Connect 3 software hopefully down here. Oh, it just popped up on its own. To use the full functionality, please upgrade the firmware. Going to settings and then update. Well, let's see if there is an update regardless. It says there's an update for the Hydroshift LCD. Okay, and we'll hit update. Just like a BIOS update, leave it alone and let it update the firmware on your liquid cooler screen. Ridiculous. Of course, if you own a Tesla, you get firmware updates on your car. So this is what the world's coming to. I'm going to get firmware updates on my refrigerator. Oh, that's already happening? Forget I said anything. So we got GPU load, CPU load. It looks like we've got voltage. And this is watts and volts. I want to see temps. Please reboot after completing the firmware. Well, that makes sense. You do want to shut the computer off, not just reboot it. Generally speaking, when it comes to firmware updates, the machine needs to turn off and turn back on again. So we're going to do that right now. All right, so the machine is off. I'm just waiting for the fans to stop. There we go. Right there. Now we'll turn it back on. Right there. And here we go. So that booted up much faster. Fans crank up a little bit. Okay, wants us to go back to the firmware again. And there is a new firmware for the fan controller. We'll update that as well. I love that I don't have to dig around locating the firmware, checking it against the version I have, and doing that on any regular basis. It's a pain in the butt. I love that the software will bring it to my attention as needed. Once again, we're going to shut down. And now that we have that out of the way, we should have all the latest functionality with the latest firmware. You don't have to have the latest functionality. If you want to stay in an old firmware version, knock yourself out. The firmware is free. It gives you enhanced functionality. Why wouldn't you take it? Most people just don't know it's available. So having the software like Samsung Magician, when it tells you there's a new firmware, it alerts you to it so you don't have to keep checking periodically, and then you forget to check after a while. That was a fast boot up. Holy cow. All right, so now look at how fast they came up. Displays a floating system information. I guess that's this here. But how do we control what information's in here? Watts, volts, load. Oh, temperature's at 42. Storage information, network speed, RAM use. We got 48 gigs of RAM in this bad boy. We've got our fan profile page, which we could leave as default, whatever you want. Set it to quiet. Hit apply. Sure, why not? TL fan utility. This is for grouping the fans together in different groups if you want them to all be synchronized. And what I would do is I would change this to let's just do, what is tail chasing? Tail chasing? Let me take a look at that. Yeah, I don't like that. I should probably show you guys what I'm doing, huh? Let's go back over to, come on keyboard, wake up. Hello keyboard. There it is. Let's go back to camera 1 for a second. So that's tail chasing. Not what you thought it was it? All right, let's bring this over here. Let's put it over here. You don't need to see me. And let's go through these options together. You guys can vote, but I have a feeling I already know what I want. So right over here, where was I? Lighting effects. All right, tail chasing. Rainbow is what we started with. Static color is what I think I want. And with static color, I think I just want white. Can I do white on both of them? And apply it. Ooh, oh, I think this is the way to go. Now, how do I make all of my fans? See, I've got 1, 2, and 3. I should be able to tie these or link these. Should be like a linking button. So, oh, merge maybe? If we turn this one on and say to merge it, does it change them all? Apply. No, it merged it the other way. I guess I have to set static color set as white. Then I get a little bucket and I can paint the squares, the two colors white. I just want white. Then hit apply. And then I have to change the RAM to white. Hey, Mara.
Yeah.
Now come look. Oh, and the motherboard's also rainbow effect as well. But I'm thinking something like that, but just all white.
No.
No? What do you mean no?
I mean, it's
Too
okay.
subtle? Now remember, the RAM would be
So-
white and the motherboard will be white too.
It still looks good.
Ice, baby. That's my vanilla ice build.
Right. Yeah, except for your RAM, which is still.
No, but I'll get to that. That's using the motherboard software.
I mean.
All right, hold on.
It's
We're gonna.
beautiful.
Okay, so do you see the block? This is what our block looks like. We can change the style of this to represent that. Is it changed?
Yes.
Or
Hey,
that?
that's neat. Ooh.
Or that?
Pretty.
Or that? You're probably, your top of your head's probably in my shot.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
There's that one.
Wow.
We can do our own image like that. Or we can show it's raining.
Cool.
We can show a meteor shower if that's any nicer. More snow.
Oh my, wow.
Oh my
Yeah,
wow.
That's pretty neat.
Fireworks. How about some fireworks?
Sure, why not?
Because this is what I wanted a water cooler to do.
Ah! Oh, that's awesome.
There's a twist hole. There's a scope.
Ooh.
That feels a little Rick and Morty. I like that one. There's Mandela. You didn't actually see that.
Modular.
You just, oh, never mind. And then there's Blossom. What does Blossom do? It's got to be more than just that. Oh, there it goes.
Ooh, haha. Hey, creative. I like it.
So I think I'm going to put it on scope. Kind of dig in scope. So our pump profile is on a fixed RPM, essentially. We're on an all-in-one block. And I don't think it matters. PWM says performance. We can just leave that alone, but you can play with it if you want to. There's more themes over here. Look here. There's transform. There's time tunnel. You probably like time tunnel. There's whirlpool.
Wow, that's hard to pick. I kind of
Radiant
like them all.
rainbow.
Yeah, I kind of like them all.
I'm kind of digging radiant rainbow right now.
Yeah, it's
Here's
neat.
fly in wording. So I guess the words are going to fly in.
Ooh, hey, that is neat.
Where's
Oh
the
my
words?
gosh.
There's no words yet.
Well, you need to add the words.
I thought that it would...
There's a word. There.
Where?
It says welcome.
Oh, I missed it.
Oh, that is... Wow, that's cool.
And I guess you could have your CPU temp in there, whatever you want displayed.
Wow.
Snow wording. Give it a second to load. I'm thinking I'm digging this one, personally.
Okay. All right.
All right, so with that done, then the question is, does it actually do anything, right? So if we go back over here, Mike said, she said no. What part of that word do you not understand? The no part of it. Let's take a look at Cinebench and see how the cooler runs with Cinebench. We should see high performance numbers and cool temperatures. then it should look fantastic. It look fabulous. Well, it's working. The word should, I'm saying that should a lot, qualifying my statements, but everything's looking really good so far. Now that was just the water block, right? I still hadn't gone through all the color options here. If we go back to the L-Connect 3, which should be minimized down here. We go back under our fan utility or our fan profiles. So the fan profiles are literally the speed of the fans and how you want them to run. The fan utility will cover our colors. So I've got static color, but there's also runaway. Interesting. And we've got something called Meteor. We have something called color cycle. That should be pretty close to rainbow, I suppose. Render? What does that even mean? Nah. Tail chasing stack. What does stack do? Oh, it's running in circles around each fan. Weird. Okay. Color cycle. I feel like that's still rainbow. Like, I don't understand. And then we've got, oh, it says cover cycle, not color cycle. Wave. What does wave look like? And finally, this one says racing. Now remember, you can change the colors and you can change the speed and the brightness. And I've got them all grouped to do the same thing, which is what I would think you would want. But obviously, rainbow is the popular one. That's going to be the default. That's matching the RAM and motherboard right now. So I'll leave it to that just so it all color matches, and I'll deal with the details later. So we got system info here. Fan pump profile is here. Quick sync lighting. I wonder if it finds, if I turn on this, will it find our RAM? I think it did find our RAM automatically. I may not need the ASRock utility. Now let me try going back. So you can waste hours getting nothing done, just getting the colors and the patterns just right. So let's go back to, it's the fan utility. Oh, motherboard. I thought that said M8. Motherboard lighting sync. That means we need to use the motherboard lighting software instead of the L-Connect 3. And that's what's going to communicate with the motherboard RGB, the RGB on the RAM, and the fan controller, not through L-Connect. But we still need L-Connect because that's what's enabling that to communicate with the motherboard and to control, because we'll never be able to control the screen on the cooler, on the pump cooler. The cooler pump through generic RGB motherboard software. This is almost always controlled in a proprietary way from the manufacturer. So if it's Thermaltake, you'll need their software. NZXT needs their software. Cooler Master wants their IQ software, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if I go back over here and run, let's bring over Cinebench. I never did bring that over. And we shouldn't really need any hardware information monitoring our temps, but they should read the same as what we're seeing on the block.
Should. So let's go back over to hardware info 32. No, not 32. I want 64. So everything looks pretty. Now the question is, does it perform? Is this a one-trick pony? Or does it actually do well and look good while it's doing it? This is where we find out. We're going to expand our core temperatures now. Oh, we're running a nice chilly 28 Celsius. That's really good. And then I'll bring up Cinebench. And you know, Cinebench is going to get really hot right away. In the first 90 seconds, we'll probably see our peak temperatures. And we should hear the fans ramp up. And our temperatures are still staying pretty low here at 65 as a max. Yeah, these temps look really good. If we can get through the first 90 seconds and we're not getting any hotter than that, then I'd say this cooler is overkill for this chip. Maybe too early to say. The fans get louder as necessary. That's the way it's supposed to work. They shouldn't be loud all the time. One of two reasons your fans are loud all the time is, as I previously mentioned, you may have them misconfigured in your BIOS, or you're using an older machine for a purpose it was never designed to do other than momentarily. So you underbought, or you're holding on to something that you're abusing the crap out of it. All right, so 71, that's still really chilly. And we're just about 90 seconds through the test, so it looks to me like, I'll tell you what, this looks really impressive. This is far better than I thought it would be. Now remember, we're going to have a glass top on this, so we're not going to have any airflow at the top. We're not going to have any airflow from the front, and we're obviously not going to have any airflow from the side. That's all glass. All of our airflow is coming in from the bottom and exhausting out the back, where the connector's next to the I/O shield, and out the back where the radiator is, where these three fans are right here. Airflow is coming towards me. It's coming in from the bottom, and you'll see we've got a nice big gap from the feet. So even if you set this on carpet, you are not going to unknowingly suffocate your parts. Thankfully, the power supply is up here on the back, so there's no way you're going to suffocate that from putting it on carpet unless you were to lay it flat. If we laid this on its back and turned it on, we would be blocking the rear airflow and the input airflow from the power supply. That would suffocate it. Very different design here. I like it. We're going to check back in on this in about 7 minutes. Now, I've not been paying attention to the chat room, so while this runs, I'm going to look back over here at the chat and see what you guys have been saying, and I see if I can get caught up in any missing super chats. I've not been watching, so I'm trying to get this done on time or within our time today. And we got pretty much where I wanted to go. Mark Gaines mentions we can load our own animation on the block. Of course, you know, I have my spinning carry logo we did years ago on the Kraken. I only expect things like this to get better. So for, you know, that kind of polishing, I'll do it later. But yes, for those of you who aren't aware, you've been able to load your own like animated GIF photos that are certain size or smaller to cooler screens pretty much since the Kraken, what was it called? I think NZXT was first, and then Corsair did it, and Lian Lee's doing it, and Thermaltake's doing it. They all do it now, at least at a certain price point. There may be some LCD coolers that are less expensive that don't allow that. But, you know, Asus, Ryzen cooler, all of them, the Trikes cooler, you can set your own videos up. Or your own static graphics, too. You want to put a little hamster in a wheel on there, you go right, no problem. All right, let's see. Thank you, Mark. Kevin wants to know if I'm going to be adding the Strimer cable. Yeah, that's why we've got the Strimer cable. What I do, I set it down. Yeah, this is also Lian Li, the Strimer Plus, and we will add that as well. And all that RGB will tie in together. Because there's no GPU in here, there's no reason to add a GPU Strimer cable, but for another 50 or 60 bucks, you can buy that too. Mike Quinton says, can you discuss water cooler maintenance like drainage and the type of fluids? You don't do any of that with an all-in-one cooler. They're sealed at the factory, you're done. These coolers are, what you're referring to is if you were to, what you're referring to is called an open loop cooler. And that's a cooler that you are designing yourself. Let me, I'm just realizing I'm not really on camera, am I? Let me come over here and I'm going to move my camera over here. We don't need to see this stuff down. What should I do? If I put this over here, and then I can put this that's going to stay. Now I can't see my temps. Hold on a minute. I've confused myself. Now I can see it. Move that over here. Oh yeah, okay, so we can keep an eye on it. Open loop coolers are coolers where you buy the block, you buy a reservoir, you buy your fluid, you cut your pipes, you have to terminate the pipes into each in and out of every device the fluid's going in and out of. I don't do any of that, that's plumbing. An all-in-one cooler is a closed loop or CLC, closed loop cooler, and that's sealed at the factory. There's no maintenance. You just plug it in no differently than any other part. No maintenance. Just make sure you blow the dust and dirt out of the radiator and the fans as you normally would be doing with your fans anyway. If your radiator gets plugged up, you're going to find it gets louder and louder and your temps get higher and higher, depending on how long it's been since you last did it, if you've ever done it, and how dusty your environment is. If you have pets, etc., that will increase the maintenance of blowing the stuff out. That's all you have to do is blow it out. John Paul Bacon mentions some newer all-in-ones can be refilled. It is my opinion you should not do that. So for example, we've seen some coolers from Be Quiet and they have a fill valve. They're not intended to be drained, only to be topped off as fluid evaporates. But much like a car's water pump, the pumps themselves wear out and the fluid gets older, so your car will have a maintenance of how often the antifreeze should be flushed and refilled. To simply refill these properly, you need to flush them, and I'm not aware of any that allow for flushing. They may have a fill hole that you could use as a drain hole, but you'll likely never get the old stuff out. You'll get most of it, but as long as it remains, the other issues you have is because it's sealed, you cannot see the condition of your cold plate and whether or not it's corroded. Also, your impeller, the pump itself, it will become less efficient over time. If you're looking for a solution that's a one and done, you want to stick with an air cooler. If you're looking for a liquid cooler, expect to replace it about every 5 years. Now, having said that, I don't know how many of you still are running a liquid cooler older than 5 years old. It's possible your cooler could go longer than that. The average is about 5 years. Some coolers will die after 3 years. We had one die after 1 year, but a tower cooler will universally last indefinitely. The worst thing you have to do is change a fan, and that doesn't happen too often. But with coolers, liquid coolers, you have to understand the liquid will deteriorate over time, it will evaporate over time, and it may leave corrosion on the inner parts inside the radiator and on the cold plate that you simply can't see without opening it. And many times once they're open, they cannot be closed properly unless you're a skilled technician. And for all the time and labor that takes, you could have simply bought a new one for whatever this cooler costs. Today, in 5 years, it'll be much cheaper for an even better cooler that will run even more efficiently. I promise you, they only get cheaper and better. Trying to hold on to something old to try and get your money out of it is just holding yourself back. You're not alive forever. So if you want to have the best computer experience possible, it is important to understand your expectations. Put an air cooler on it if you don't want to mess with it and you want to keep it for 10 years. Put a liquid cooler on it if the looks are important to you or the cooling is absolutely necessary. Do an open loop cooler if you want to. We don't do that here, but there are plenty of other enthusiast channels that do that. We don't. I don't want to. I don't even want to hook up all this RGB. I sure as heck don't want to do plumbing. I'm a computer tech. Damn it, Jim, I'm a computer tech, not a plumber. But there are people that want to do that. Now, when you do your own, you can have a serious issue with bacteria growth and corrosion if you don't drain and refill that fluid annually. If you wait till there's a problem, you might have to replace parts or spend a lot of time getting them clean from corrosion and all the bacteria and staining that can happen, especially if you use different color dyes. You're looking for clear tubes so you can change the color of your fluid. You can do all that. And you can easily spend $1,200 to $1,500 on an open loop cooler when you buy everything separately. Everything's a la carte, right? You got a block, you may have a flow indicator, you have a reservoir, you've got to prime the pump. Every time you have a fitting going together, it could leak. Every time you open it to drain it and do maintenance, you could have a leak, you could break something. And if you enjoy that kind of thing and pay money to do that, have at it. We don't do that here. It's ridiculous. It looks spectacular. I appreciate when my friends own really nice boats, but I'm never going to own a boat because I don't want to maintain it. I'll rent a boat. So when it comes to the coolers and the machines, I want to build something that I can support, that I could sell a customer and not have that customer reach out to me in a few months with a heat-related problem or a fan-related problem because I'm not a hobbyist. As a person that's selling computers at a big scale, I'm not just building one. This is, how many this month have I done? In the last 6 weeks, this is 4 or 5. And that's just one guy. And my business is relatively slow. At peak, I was doing 14 in 2 weeks, 10 days, if you go back a couple of years. That was one customer that needed 14 machines. And I don't want to go back and forth 14 times. Get them all done, load them in the car, and I want to get paid all at once. I don't want to get paid one machine, and piecemeal it. Get it all delivered. They all have the same warranty because they were all delivered on the same day. It's the same paperwork. There's not many receipts. I get one big check. That's typically what we talk about working at scale. You might be sitting at home building a computer, and that might be the only one you build for 10 years. I don't know you. But you need to build what's right for you. Open loop coolers are not right for me, and there is no maintenance on the coolers I install. Well, you might be able to do some maintenance. We don't do that. That's a hobbyist activity. It's not a business activity. So just keep that in mind, that when you ask me certain questions, you're going to get it from a business side. Even if the business is selling computers to consumers, we don't want the consumers to have the option of opening up and draining fluid, because then they're going to break it, and we're going to get into an argument over whether or not that's going to cost my company money because they think it should be a warranty issue. It's a big mess. But what you do for you, whatever you want. If a cooler says all in one, there's no maintenance on it. It's all sealed from the factory. You plug it in, you're good to go. Okay, thank you for the question. Scott says a boat stands for bust out another 1,000. Sounds about right. I love other people's boats. Thank you again, Mike, for the question. Let's scroll around here. Dean Sermersheim says hello. There's Bajan Guy joining us, and Bill Sony T. Kevin Smith says, oh yeah, we answered that. We're going to be adding the Strimer. Shamim Kajvira says, even if it's a black case, I like the fans to have white RGB. Yeah, I guess, again, it's personal. That's why you get all these colors to choose from and patterns. I'm going to keep scrolling up and see everything else I've been missing here for the last hour or so. Well, fans are nice and quiet now that our test stopped. Oh, yeah, it did. Let's start the other test. And again, we'll keep an eye on those temps. Oops, that's not the right one. Is it that one? Oh, the fans, when they ramp up, they don't ramp up as loud as they did initially. They're somewhere in the middle between quiet and loud. It's comforting because I know it's working. Peter from the Netherlands contributes €5 from is it Amsterdam? Thank you, Peter. Thank you for continuing to support the channel, for hanging out with us today. JMalt31 says, I always have trouble with the ARGB connections. It needs to be lined up perfectly to slide on, and they should update that connector. Amen. Mark Leibowitz, who runs a computer repair business, computer servicing business, says, I don't get it. It's been Black Friday all month, and yet 2 people in the last 24 hours called looking for fixes to computers running outdated operating systems and objected when I said to buy new PCs. You could have taken a different approach. You could have said the estimate on fixing that problem will be $565, or we can sell you a new PC for $499. You can have the new PC immediately, or the fix might take 3 or 4 days. Let them decide. I got an estimate today as well. Customer reached out. One of my customers that I do managed service providing for, one of the employees said, thinking about getting their husband a new computer that uses Adobe Illustrated. And would I have anything? Do I have anything? Oh, I've got lots of stuff. I got mini PCs, full size. You want to upgrade what you've got. What's the problem he's having, and what are the specifications of the machine he's using? What's the CPU, RAM, and what's the problem? And also, how fast is your internet, and are you connected to it wirelessly or wired? Because if they're running Adobe products, they might be running online. And if their internet connection is too slow, or if their Wi-Fi on their router or on the computer is too slow, they may not be looking for a computer upgrade to solve the problem. So you can see how that one question led me to 4 or 5 other questions. But I have an answer. No matter what the answers are, I'm just not sure what the right answer is yet until I get that information, and then they'll get that and get back to me. That way, when I sell them something, I feel very confident they're going to be very happy with the end result. Gary says, shouldn't there be a USB going to the pump screen? So the pump screen is connecting into a fan controller. So anytime a manufacturer includes a fan controller, it's more efficient and it's cleaner cabling and it's less cost to manufacture, the fan controller being the brains of the pump screen and the fans at the same time. It's just smarter. And as the technology continues to evolve, these fan controllers can get smaller and smaller. They might be able to one day soon just build it right into the cable. They'll just have a little circuit right in the cable. But in the older days, like 6 months ago, you used to have to plug your pump into USB, and then your fans, if they had a controller, would plug into USB. But I think where you're getting confused is not all fans use a controller separately. Some fans, especially when we're talking about specifically RGB fans, can just use generic ARGB as an option for controlling their RGB. And some pumps that don't have screens may also just use an ARGB plug. And then we're just talking about selecting colors and controlling color patterns. But the minute you want to enhance that, like the way that these fans have multiple lights that go around the outside and lights that go around the inside, and they work separately. So you can have different patterns on one fan, can have 2 lighting patterns, and then in multiple colors. Then on top of that, on the water block, you can not only display images, but movies. And so what you used to do is you'd plug your water block into your USB and you would download software specifically for the water block only in most cases. And the fans, you were just controlling RPM, not necessarily any RGB. What it's evolved to today is that when you buy the pump, especially if you buy an expensive one, this one was about $260, you get the screen, the pump, the fans, the radiator. It's already filled, it's all in one, it's sealed at the factory. You just plug it all in, plug it in the fan controller, and the fan controller then plugs into the USB, and the software communicates to the fan controller, and that fan controller has proprietary plugs that go to the fans and the block. They're the same plugs, but you won't find where they fit in anything but a Lian Leaf fan controller. And that way it can communicate with them very easily, and you use the L-Connect 3 software, and then you can tell the L-Connect 3 software to listen to your motherboard software. So if we have an ASUS board, or an ASRock in this case, or MSI, or Gigabyte, they all have their own proprietary designed software for controlling RGB, or you can download a third-party RGB controller software as well. But this is just the continuing advancement of the technology. So yes, you were right, and in some cases still are at a certain price point. But when you're getting the latest and greatest stuff, this is the way that the latest and greatest hooks up. Remember, we talk about those expectations. We talk about people, and I'm guilty of it as well, that we learned how to do something a while back, and we can still do it that way today, but it's not an efficient way to do it anymore. Like multiple partitions and stuff like that. It's an old school way of thought, putting a bunch of hard drives in a desktop. It's an old school thought process that doesn't really benefit you today for various reasons, including power consumption, likelihood of failure, and performance is all very down for that. So having single SSD and putting your data externally on something is much safer. And in a lot of cases, even cloud storage is very viable unless you've got copious amounts of data, in which case the network attached storage devices. They're so inexpensive now. You can't miss what you never had, but if you're that kind of user and you're denying yourself that, you're going to beat yourself up for it when you realize how much easier and more convenient your life can be by just adopting what's available today instead of holding on to what you got yesterday. Now, in my line of work, older hardware requires more maintenance, and if I'm on a maintenance contract where basically that's a flat rate fee, that's the way I choose to do my business. If I work harder, I'm losing money. If I have to frequently keep going back to keep old hardware up because it's old, it takes me longer to get anything done because the old hardware is not as fast. The old hardware is more prone to needing maintenance. When we get new hardware, I don't have to maintain it as much, so I make more profit. A lot of people will pre-sell hours. You get this many hours. The reason I don't do that is how can a client know that if it took you 2 hours that you're billing them for out of that prepayment, that wasn't a 1 hour job that you just did real slow to milk it? So by paying for my customers to pay me a flat fee, it's in my best interest for profit to work as quickly as possible and to get it done right the first time, or I'm the one it's costing, not the customer. Customer's paying the same. So I'm always going to emphasize, if it's making my life easier as a maintenance technician to have new hardware, how much easier is it going to make your life? Something to think about. You don't know what you don't know, and if you don't have the experience, if you've never had it, you can't miss it. You don't know what you're missing. So it's something to keep in mind. It could be a good reason to upgrade if it's been a while and you're interested in having a new experience, just to see how far along this stuff has come. It's pretty amazing in just a relatively short period of time. Whether we're talking about storage or coolers. You know, speaking of storage, I mentioned the other day, we're going to start seeing 16 terabyte NVMe drives in 2025. And no sooner than I said that, I found this article published. Are you sitting down? Let's go here. Team Group unveils 16 terabyte external SSD with speeds up to 2000. All right, so that 1800. That's going to be USB 3.2 Gen 2. It's probably going to sell for well north of $2,000 when it first comes out. It's, if you can get a price of $100 a terabyte, that's pretty good. But yeah, look at this. It's an external USB 16 terabyte SSD, and it will be available next month. So in 2024. Unfortunately, this article was published before I made that prediction. I just wasn't aware of it until afterwards. So I'm like, see, I predicted it. But it already happened. And it's only going to have a 3-year warranty. The industry standard is 5. That's a little suspicious. And the information that's available is a little bit vague right now. But yeah, Q4 of 2024. And it should sell for between 2,000 and 4,000. I suspect it probably will sell initially for probably close to 3,000, maybe 2,800. And then 6 months to a year, it'll probably drop to 1,800 or lower. And then, of course, you'll see the NVMe drives coming out at that size too. We're already moving up. The next size after this will be 32 terabytes. You can now close your jaws. It's incredible. All right, how did we do over here? Did our test finish? Okay, there's our score on the multi-core. There's our single core. And as far as maximum temperatures go, we never broke 70. Are you kidding me? We never broke 70? 71 on the whole package. Color me impressed. You don't see that too often. So not only does this cooler look fantastic, it was easy to install once I figured out the modification for this specific case that I ordinarily wouldn't have to do. Once we got past that little pinch point, end result is it looks good. It works better than it looks, as good as it looks. It's clean, relatively easy to install now that I know the process. And it was expensive, all right? As far as coolers go, it's one of the most expensive, not the most. Asus Ryzen coolers can cost more than this. But I also think they might work better. I don't know. This one works way better than I thought it would. So that may just be an assumption I have going into this that I haven't let go of yet. Now, as you can imagine, a glass panel here, a glass panel here, and a glass panel here with no frame, just pure glass. That's why I'm thinking this may be the new Strimer. I'm really impressed with this. I don't need this in here anymore, so we'll take that out. Actually, I haven't needed that for a long time. Let me go back to the chat, address any other final questions you might have, and then we'll wrap it up for today because we're still going long, but at least I'm getting the work done. You know, there's that. I didn't spend too much time waffling. Wouldn't be a Carrie video if there were no waffles. Does that computer have a light dimmer? You can adjust the brightness of the RGB. When we bring up the software, that's one of the things you can control is how bright, and you can turn it off altogether as well, right through the RGB software. JML says, put the glass on and run the temp test. I'm curious to see if the temps will rise. You know what? That's an easy thing to do, and it can give you sort of a preview of what this is going to look like once I get all the finished. Like I'll put the Strimer on it, and I'll clean the cabling up a little bit. But putting the glass on is very easy, and let me show you how that's done. We've got this first glass panel. The one that goes up front, I think, is the one we want to do first. I'm no expert in this, so bear with me as I try and find, first of all, what did I do with the glass? I set it over here somewhere. I think this is it right here. So this is going to be the piece of glass that goes on the front. And we want to start here because this decorative piece here is going to cover up the screws that hold the glass. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. And then there are 2 thumb screws that go on the bottom on the inside. There are also 2 metal nubs that stick out, and I'm getting fingerprints all over this, so I would obviously clean it. But just to rush through this during a live video, we would simply align this so that those tabs fit in the holes at the bottom. You know, it's good to have some guides so we ensure that we are in the right location so the screws aren't going to be cross-threaded or sideways. So that kind of locks in at the bottom. Now over here, I've got a bunch of screws. So these 2 big thumb screws, these went down at the bottom of this glass. And if I can do this without running my palm into the running fan, probably want to do this when the machine is off. It's not that the fans can really hurt you, it's just startling. It's not good on the fans to suddenly stop them because you accidentally dragged your hand across them. And this doesn't have to be overly tight. The glass has so many secure points to it, right? We've got 4 along the side plus the 2 thumb screws. This one is right in the corner by 2 fans, and really should probably turn this off to do this. But yeah, I can't see any way I can get to those without shutting the machine off. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to skip this one for now. We'll come back to it. Let's grab one of these. We're going to need 4 of these, and we'll attach them right onto the edge here. That also helps align the glass. You want this glass aligned because all the other glass is going to depend on this first piece of glass being completely straight and flush with the case. See how it just seated? So I'm just going to put that 1 screw in for now, just so we speed this along. Now we've got 2 decorative pieces, a piece that goes here and here, and those I set down here. So this one has the button, and then that's going to cover the screws up, right, assuming we had put all the screws in. And then this will also have screws to hold it in place. See that? It very easily comes off, so we'll just put 1 screw in there for now. That way it won't fall off and hit the floor and scratch it or hurt anything. But you would put a screw here, and here, right here, and here. So 3 there, 4 on the inside, that's 7, plus the 2, that's 9. Then we've got a decorative piece that goes across the top. And that piece, this is like metal. This is a much heavier piece. It's got a captive thumb screw in the back, which is nice, so I don't have to worry about losing the screw. And that just fits into a slot right up front, slides forward, and you just tighten that down. Okay, and then that leaves us with just 2 pieces of glass left. So we've got our large side window right here. This has 1 thumb screw on it, and it's got 2 tabs that poke out of the bottom. And you're just going to align that, and the tabs will fit into the slots. And bring the glass up. You might have to pull the screw away a little bit. And then it should click in right up here. There it goes. Completely frameless. And then we've got the top, and the top also has 2 captive thumb screws, and that's going to fit right up on top like this. Slide into there's a little keyhole, slide it forward, and tighten it up. Hey Mara, come look. Of course, we then have the back panel, which is just a fully ventilated rear panel with the glass. She's got a big smile.
It's really nice.
So the question is, does it run any differently temperature-wise with the glass on it? I don't believe it will, because all our airflow is coming in from the bottom and going out the back here and the back towards me.
Well,
I don't think this will impede our airflow in any way, shape, or form.
Well, but that, and you're not going to see that in 10 minutes. I mean,
Well, no, if I run Cinebench again and work it. I was trying to keep the machine on so we still have our previous results up to compare it with. So let me jump back over to camera 2. We'll turn off camera 1 here, and let's start the test. Remember these numbers, folks. Well, actually, I take it back. Cinebench is going to remember the numbers.
I really like the chrome accent in this too. It's neat.
There's chrome?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to start the test, and we'll take a look and see what our temps are. Like I said, Cinebench in the first 90 seconds will pretty much make the CPU as hot as it's going to get. We're sitting at 63, 64. And I don't think it's going to make any difference.
That's truly really nice to look at. Really nice.
Yeah, but what about the computer?
That too.
Oh, okay, thank you. Just want to make sure.
This is the spice to the
spice.
to the lovely picture that's right in front of me.
That's right.
Yeah, that's really nice to look at.
So remember, we'll have a rear panel on here.
Oh no!
What's wrong?
It's only half done.
Yeah, don't look at the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, it's that is
Super
super
nice.
super nice. Love it.
Let me see what our temps are. I can't see them when they're that small. Yeah, it hasn't peaked out anywhere near what it did before. If anything, it seems like it's running cooler with the cover on it. But which makes sense because it's forcing the air to flow out the way we want it to, not to just openly flow wherever it wants to. A properly designed case should have better airflow when the covers are on, for that reason. All right, so while we're watching that, let's go back to the chat and see if there's other questions. JMalt says the high was 72. I only saw 71, but regardless, it's still really, really low. I'm good with it. Remember, the temperature of this room is not the same as it was 20 minutes ago. You might feel like your room temperature hasn't changed, but it has. If you monitor your room temperature with the same precision that we're monitoring the CPU, you'll find your room temperature also changed in whatever direction your CPU temperature went. If your room got cooler, your temp might be a little cooler. If your room got hotter, the ambient temperature in which you are running the test is constantly fluctuating by a couple degrees. So if we see a couple of degrees difference in our test, that is usually you're plus or minus 2 to 3 degrees for error correction for the room temperature. Of course, there's a bigger degree of difference in Celsius than Fahrenheit, but with Fahrenheit, it's very difficult to tell when you're getting 1 or 2 degrees away from whatever your room temperature is. In Celsius, it may be decimals, but it still makes a difference. David Graham says, how soon can you ship that to me? What, you didn't already get it? The good news is you can order this on Amazon and build it and not pay for any of the shipping that I would have to pay for and have a full warranty, and you wouldn't have to deal with me. Hey, Mara, can you do me a favor?
Sorry?
Do me a favor?
Yes.
Would you turn off the studio lights? And also the big studio light, there's a switch hanging on it right over there, straight ahead. Just hit the power switch, the power outlet surge protector. Okay, now look at it.
Oh, wow. Love it.
This reminds me of Fruit Stripes gum.
Show your age.
Who said that?
Who said that?
Fans are really working. What's our temps now? Still at 65, 67. I'm looking at 71. I don't really read these temperatures up here, but if you want to count that, that's fine. And we're well over 4 minutes, nearly 5 minutes into this test, so we're past the worst of it. All right, let me keep looking back at the chat here. Rajan Guy says, wow. And again, we can control the brightness. If it's too bright for your room, you can turn the brightness down.
I would never do
No, of course you wouldn't.
that.
Even on the rear of it, you see the RGB around the edges of the fans.
That is quite good though.
Then, of course, the other side is totally ugly, but we're just going to put a panel over it.
All we need is some floating fish and some sharks.
And then remember, if we wanted to cover some of this cabling up, we could just move this little door. And already it looks better. Just cover that up, it'll be fine.
Sharks, fish, maybe some piranha.
How about some koi? Clownfish?
They're cheap.
Seahorses?
You need like piranha in there.
Piranha.
Yeah.
They're ugly, though.
Things with teeth.
Things with teeth.
Yeah. That'd be great.
So like a saw? How about a sawfish?
You could totally do that. Stingray?
You know, they say fish will grow bigger if they're in a bigger tank.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I wear oversized boxers. All right, anyway. Moving on. Should we bring the lights back up?
Oh, no. Do you want me to turn it back on?
Please. I think everybody got their RGB. There's one studio light, and there's the, no, you turned on the wrong set. There we go. Thank you.
No problem.
Now that's just in the default rainbow color commit, right? We went through all the different settings and we can change the screen, et cetera, et cetera. Morton said you might have to remove the bottom fans, the thumb screws in securely. They don't have to be that secure. You know, just as tight as you can get them with your fingers. It is glass. And again, the bottom fans, you can take the whole bracket out with 2 screws. So it's really easy to take the bottom fans out if we want to. Mark Gaines wants to know if Mara has seen the new case from ASA. It's shaped like a diamond. I don't think I've even seen that. Let's go over here to, is it Amazon you saw that? There's the triangle, or the pyramid. There's the square. Maybe a Google search as a diamond case. Oh! Oh, I have not seen this. Come look. You're gonna, boy, you want to talk about bling. Look at that.
Ooh, that's neat. I like that.
All right, let's look at some of the pictures.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Oh, it's got one fan up here.
That's really. Wow.
You know those.
Good find.
Yeah, but those cases are cheaply made. ASA's not exactly known for high quality stamp material, and it might be massive. I don't know. What size board will it fit? Micro ATX or full ATX? How many slot covers did it have in the back? None. Come on now.
Wow.
I can't tell.
I like it. Unique.
Diamonds have symbolized an unbreakable heart and everlasting love. The ASA diamond reflects your true heart and unconquerable spirit in every match. This elegant chassis presents a panoramic design with all-around glass panels and 5-sided mesh shrouds that maximizes air intake. And now back to you. It'll hold a 360 millimeter radiator. That's pretty freaking big. Oh, the ILs on the bottom. They must have been learning from Apple. Good number of ports there. That passes my test. Cooling hub and veil. Oh, that's for the fan controller. Okay. A couple SSDs, GPU. I still can't count how many slots it has. Oh, here we go. It can accommodate a full ATX. Wow. I wish you didn't bring that to my attention. What kind of cooler was on that? There was like a pyramid cooler inside of the diamond case. Built with quality material? I'll be the judge of that. But still, the front panel looks good. It's got everything I'd want. I think this case is bigger than you think it is, though. That may be a real bear to move that around. Like, you probably have children that are easier to pick up than that. I want to freeze frame this if I can, or pause it when it gets to the... What is the cooler right there? What is that? Looks like fun to dust. Okay, enough of that. Let's go back to camera 1 and camera 2. And did our test finish? I think it did. The fans got really quiet. Let's run the second test. And let me go back over to the chat room. Ron wants to know how your cooking is going, Mara.
My cooking is going great. I just finished dish number 10.
10.
10.
Usually when you go over somebody's place for Thanksgiving, you bring a dish or 2, not 10.
I can't help myself. You know me.
She gets
The
into
Italian in me. It means feed the world.
And feed them healthy.
And feed them healthy.
So she's not making anything for me.
Aha! I would like to.
Well, you better get the deep fryer and the breading.
Deep fryer, potatoes, Doritos.
If it's got nugget in the name, I'm
chicken
in.
nuggets, yeah, steak, maybe.
Pretzel nuggets.
Pretzel, yeah.
I eat like a 4-year-old. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. So if it doesn't come in a package, you're not going to eat it.
Or a blanket.
Or a blanket.
Where is Mitch off to? Mitch right now is in Austin, Texas. So I guess he's off to Colorado and then back to Phoenix, I think. I can never remember Mitch's schedule. I barely remember mine. I think Mitch is used to it now. Like, hey, Mitch, how's it going? He goes, oh, I'm doing fine. Just in the car driving back from, insert random state name here. Oh, I forgot you were gone. Oh, yeah. Did I lose my temperature? Here we go. Put that back. Yeah, nothing really seems any different with the panels on or off. It shouldn't either. Like I said, a proper case should actually cool better with the panels on so that you're controlling the airflow direction and keeping the air from escaping in any other exit than you want it to go. So without the panels on, it's sort of like having water just on the floor or controlling it in a pan and then tipping the pan one way or the other to control the flow of the water. The case panels do that with the airflow, the direction. You can't see it, but if we had a fog machine or some kind of a machine that we could visualize the air moving through the system, you would see it coming up from the bottom and going at the back and the side of it here. And if we took the panels off and ran the test again, you would still see the airflow coming out the back and the side, but you'd also see a lot of it just kind of going out, you know, from the opposite side just because it can. There's no control. There's nothing to keep it in place and force it. And that's going to give you much better cooling as a result, obviously. I think that's obvious, isn't it? And let's go back to the chat room and we'll deal with it. I will be happy to answer any questions you guys have or concerns here in the chat room. Phil Stodd says, Mara, you are so welcome. And J Malt wants to know what time dinner is. R. Rodriguez says, I am speaking with you from the sky. I'm on a flight from Boston to Los Angeles, and he's in the plane, 30,000 feet up, traveling at 550 miles an hour in our chat room live right now. What a world we live in. Wayne Ellison says hello. Chris P mentions we could probably put our intro animations that we do on the videos onto the cooler. They might be a little intricate for that, but yeah, we will play with it later. I got myself pretty well familiar with the Kraken software from NZXT. Pretty well mastered it, I feel like. So it'll be fun to play with this. Nothing important, again, nothing a customer would ever pay me to do. But, you know, if I have time and I want to play, you know, if I want to make this a streamer and it's going to be on camera, I would definitely take that a bit more as a priority, right, to make sure it looks very professional on camera. Mortant said, that's going to look really nice in my basement. It'll look nice in everybody's basement. It should be in the living room when you walk in the door. It should be your centerpiece, your dining room table. David wants to know if we have an all-white GPU laying around. No, no, and I'm not going to buy one for this. I wouldn't use it. The onboard graphics on the 9900K is nothing to sneeze about. Got a little mark on this glass, but I think it's on the other side. Well, that's bugging me. What is that? They look like scratches. They better not be scratches. Is there plastic still on this? That feels like plastic.
Well, I guess I'm glad I didn't step in front of the camera. I'm covered in pea protein.
You're covered in pea protein?
Yeah.
I didn't even know peas. There's plastic on this. I didn't even see it.
Ready to peel.
I thought I already peeled it. I bet that's going to look better now. I can really see my fingerprints.
All right.
I like that there's no frame on this. I just like how
Do you want
it's...
me to get some grease? I could rub some avocado oil on it.
Yeah, that'll be fun to clean off. CPU 780. Oh, I guess because I have it. Oh, GPU says 0 degrees. It's cycling through a bunch of different specs.
Yeah, that's truly nice to look at, truly.
Should I put some RGB on you?
Please.
You're already nice to look at.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a look here one more time in the chat just to see if there's any last questions. We will wrap things up. Terry says that is a fantastic looking build you have there. I love it. It is nice, isn't it? There was a sale at Woot. I don't know if it's still happening, but they had a clearance on the Corsair 6500D for half price. So instead of 200 bucks, it was 100 bucks. Wonder if I can find it for you guys. Woot Corsair 6500D. Now the white version was sold out, but they still had the black version last night. Do they still have it? No, it's sold out. There's a website called slickdeals.net, and you can sign up there for free to get email alerts in certain categories like tech, computer peripherals, laptops, keyboards. Check the boxes you want, and they're sending lots of emails out this time of year. So your inbox will get 40, 50, 60 messages a day for the next few days if you select a lot of categories. And it can be from Amazon, Newegg, B&H Photo, eBay, obviously Amazon. But last night, this case is okay. It doesn't really excite me too much, but I don't hate it. But for 200 bucks, no thank you. For $99 plus sales tax was like $7. I ordered it. So we'll have that coming up after the holidays. I've got plenty of motherboards laying around. I'm just kind of sick of the dual chamber aquariums, but the price is right. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I'm good with it. They had the white one that was already sold out by the time I was made aware of the deal. And rear connector motherboard compatible, as you see there. At least for an ATX board. So again, price plays a big role in how much I like a part. So I might not like something one day, but then I like it the next, and you might think I'm being inconsistent when in fact the price has dropped in half. And I go, oh, well, if the price is in half, then I like it. Did our test finish? No, it's still running. It should be, because it's at 0. None of the temps really went any. Oh, wait a minute. That one hit 86. With CCD2. Okay. I don't normally see that on an Intel chip, but I guess the new Intel chips are going to have that anyway, so I might as well get used to it now, huh? Not sure which one's more important. But we should get a number here in just a minute, and that will wrap up the second test of Cinebench R23. I will know when this finishes, because even though the fans aren't loud, they're definitely running louder than normal. So once the workload drops, so let's say we were just browsing the web, we're in a Word document, spreadsheet, PDF file, this thing's going to be quiet. It's really when you're working it. And when you're working it, it doesn't really get that loud, but you definitely get some confirmation it's working, which I appreciate. Now, if it was as loud as it's being right now all the time, it's still a bit louder than I would like, but just during work, I'm good with it. I get kind of loud when I work too. I hear the fan slowing down, so I'm guessing our test has completed, and yes, our test did complete. Our scores should be within a margin of error regardless. We will never get the same exact score twice, not likely. And there you go. There you go. Let's jump back over to camera 1 full screen. And one more time to the chat room. We've been broadcasting now for 3 hours and 15 minutes, so this may be a good time for me to wrap it up. Once again, tomorrow, I think I'll just run a live stream of parts 1 through 8, unedited, with intros and exits over and over for each part. And I'll just set it to start around, see, it's 29 hours, so if I started around 10 o'clock tonight and just live stream the original 8 parts stitched together, that will end, oh, I better start it earlier. Now, I mean, I'll split the difference. I'll start it at 9 o'clock tonight, and then that'll run for 29 hours. Little, like 29 and a half hours, I think. And then you could pop in and out, and the chat will be live, but I won't be here. It will be a repeat, but just all stitched together, so not spaced out. Because that was over, pretty much each piece was done on every Friday. So that was 8 Fridays. So that's 2 months of work that's being condensed down into 29 hours. And that's also me talking to the chat room and answering questions. It's just a live, a repeat of a live broadcast. It's like on TV when they're like recorded live in front of a studio audience. It's kind of like that. And then on Friday, Black Friday, again, I'm not here to make commercials. If I know of any deals, or if you know of any deals, let us know, please, so we can share them with the community. But more importantly, I have a lot of work to catch up on. Asus very graciously sent us a ProArt motherboard, Z890 ProArt, and they sent us a ProArt cooler. They will also be sending us a ProArt case to put it in, but I won't use the case on part 1. I never do, right? So hopefully we'll get the case in time for part 2, or part 2 will be postponed. But it's a ProArt case, ProArt motherboard, ProArt cooler. In that, it's going to go an Intel Ultra 9 285K, 96 gigs of DDR5 RAM, and a T705 Gen 5 fastest consumer drive on the market, 2 terabyte. This is a business class computer designed for high-end productivity workloads. No RGB, totally blacked out. There might be RGB on the RAM. I can't remember, but it'll be subtle if there's any. The focus on this build, this upcoming build on Friday, is going to be on performance and being quiet. Silent but deadly. Kinda, yeah. So we're going to start that on Friday. The other good news I have is I just got something I cannot wait to open. The Minis Forum G7 Ti. If you didn't hear me talking about that on Monday, I am salivating and I can't open it. I want to do the unboxing. I'm not going to prep it. I'm going to truly unbox it on camera. And we'll see the state of Windows and what updates it needs. This is a 14900 with an RTX 4070 mobile chip on it. It's about $1,500. And I think it's going to be my new main rig. I think I'm going to put my Galaxy Book 4 aside because it doesn't need to be portable, right? I'm using a computer at a desk. I don't need to have a laptop at the desk. So this is everything I think it's going to be. Let me wipe off my drool. It's killing me because it's just a few feet in front of me and I can't touch it. I'm going to wait until, well, we won't do it on members only. Tuesday, I think, is the earliest I can show it to you. We'll see how it goes, but it's killing me to just have to let it sit here. So unless I get some time on the weekend, and we paid for this. Miniswarm didn't send this to us, and I don't want to do too much Miniswarm. We just did it on Monday. But this is just a coincidence. This just happened to come in. And this is like the main machine I've been looking forward to. Our friend Buster in Scotland already has one of these. And he's telling me how great it is. Like, he's teasing me. Oh, you should see how nice this computer is. Oh, if only you had one. He's not really doing that, but that's what I'm reading it. So now I'm going to have one. Now, my understanding is Buster ordered his without any RAM or storage or operating system. He did that himself. Mine should be ready to eat out of the box. In other words, just take it out, plug it in, 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte storage. I'm totally going to be happy with it. I already predict I'm going to love this. If I end up deciding I'm going to use it as my main machine, just like my laptops, I'll probably pull the SSD out, put a Western Digital SN850X in there. And normally I put the 4 terabyte drive in, but Amazon has had the Western Digital SN850X on sale for $549. Remember I said $100 a terabyte's a pretty good price. Let me show you something since this just hit my head here, got into my brain. Let's go over to Amazon and we'll type in SN850X in the search. And let's go to my screen capture here. Okay, so you're going to see the Black Friday deal. These are deals happening now, not on Black Friday. If they sell out between now and Black Friday, the deal's gone. So these are early Black Friday deals is what it should say. So if you see this red square around anything on Amazon, is it possible the price could get cheaper? I don't know, but it's also possible it could sell out. So that's your risk to take. But this is the 2 terabyte version for $123. That's a really good deal for a name brand SSD. I'm not really interested in that though. I'm interested in how much the 4 terabyte is, because that's also really inexpensive. At $247, let's follow the math with me. If you bought 2 of these drives to equal 8 terabytes, it would set you back about $595 plus sales tax. No, $495. Not just a few dollars shy of $500 for 2 of these to equal 8 terabytes. But if you go to the 8 terabyte version, this is normally nearly $900, and a fair price would be somewhere between $700 and $800. It had dropped to $650. I thought that was a good price. Then it dropped to $599, and I said, wow, that's an awesome price. Then it dropped to $549, which is still $50 more than 2 of these. And it's actually a little bit slower. This is up to 7,200 megabytes per second, and this one's up to 7,300 megabytes per second. However, you have the convenience of having 2 drives in one package, and I guess you're going to pay a premium for that. Now, there is going to be 16 terabyte drives out in this format in 2025, and they will be profoundly expensive, but so were these. When this drive first came out, the 8 terabyte version especially, this had a retail suggested price of $879.99. And I saw other drives when we first started using these 8 terabyte drives back at Studio B, they were $1,200. So in just a few months, they've come down quite a bit. Now, could this go down even further? Is it possible on Black Friday or Cyber Monday this drops to $499? Because then it would be in line with 2 of these, and I'd be like, oh, that's a no-brainer. Right now, there's still a $50 premium on that. So I can't help but wonder, should I buy it? I honestly don't think you should even have 8 terabytes in your machine. You should have that externally. But if I were going to use that G7 Ti as my main machine, I would have been putting this in there, just a 4 terabyte SN850X. That's what I've been doing to all my laptops. But now that the 8 terabytes are getting to be just barely affordable, I don't know. And of course, I would get it without the heatsink, because with the heatsink on it, well, the heatsink's not too bad. It's pretty shallow. Some of the heatsinks on these factory heatsinks can make the drive too thick to fit into a thin case like the G7 Ti. And then you got to consider your cooling, because if you're going to put this on your motherboard, I hope your motherboard already has a heatsink on it, because that's what I would recommend. Although this isn't Gen 5, it's still a high performance Gen 4, and it can get warm, but your motherboard heatsinks that support any Gen 4 M.2 will match the aesthetic of your board and will work better than any factory installed heatsink anyway. And of course, if you want it with the heatsink, the price will go up, right? Yeah, it goes up $30 just for that little tiny piece of metal across the top. Ridiculous. Oh, and I guess you get a little bonus LED that you'll never see. Well, I suppose you, okay, if you're using their heatsink, you would see it. So anyway, I just can't get over $549. I paid $100 more than that last month and thought that was a bargain. If I'd have waited a month, it'd have saved me $100 plus another $7 in sales tax. Okay, just wanted to put that out there for you guys. Miniman wants to know if anyone has any recommendations for a keyboard. I think you need to feel a keyboard. Go to Best Buy or go to a retail store and type on them. It's like asking what t-shirt or what clothes you should wear, what shoes you should wear. This is about your personal preference and your personal comfort, and I would strongly advise you not to let anybody tell you what keyboard to buy, but go and feel them and decide what looks good, what's priced well, and what feels the best. And that will be uniquely you. Now, of course, if people want to recommend keyboards, go right ahead, but understand what they're looking for in a keyboard is very likely not what you're looking for in a keyboard. It's like saying, can you recommend my haircut? I'm going to get a tattoo. Can you tell me what tattoo I should get? These are very personal decisions. I strongly recommend just go to a retail store where they're out, where you can play with them, or order from Amazon, where you have until the 1st of February now, during the holiday season, to return it if you don't like it, at no cost to return if it's Amazon Prime. This is doing something. It just ramped up a little bit. Maybe it's installing a Windows update in the background or something. David Graham said Amazon's got the Crucial P3 Plus for $194 for 4 terabyte, but it's a slower drive. So the P3 Plus, just to give you an example, why it's priced less is you're buying less. You want it slower, you'll pay less. Let's take a quick look, and I can be more precise. P3 Plus Crucial, 4 terabyte. That's going to run at only 5,000 megabytes per second, which is a good 30% slower, and it's 30% cheaper. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's no bargain there. I also don't care for Crucial's brand when it comes to reliability on SSDs. They're kind of budget drives like Kingston's and Crucial's on SSDs. I like Crucial RAM, but you won't often see me use their SSDs unless I'm putting it into a NAS or something where, you know, there's redundancy. But if we go over to the window capture one more time, just to show you, you got to pay attention to the speed of the drive. Because remember, a Gen 3 drive is going to run at 3600. You're not really going much faster than that. So then you could say, well, I could buy a Samsung, let's see, something Samsung 4 terabyte NVMe. Let's see. So the 990 I think is a waste of money. I wouldn't buy that. Was it the 990? That says 7450. That's even faster, and it's priced more accordingly. I bet you, like this 4 terabyte here from HP is $200. It says it'll do 7,400 megabytes per second. I have no idea what the quality of it is or who makes it. HP clearly doesn't make this on their own. It's probably a solid buy. What else do we have for 4 terabytes? That's external. Here's a Gen 3 from Crucial that for some reason is even more money and runs even slower. So just because it's got the red tag doesn't mean it's a good price. But if you only have a Gen 3 slot, there's no sense wasting any money on a Gen 4 drive. You might as well buy the cheaper one. You'd think Gen 3 would be cheaper. Here's a Silicon Power 4 terabyte that'll run 7,000 megabytes per second for about the same price. Silicon Power has been pretty good in my mind, in my experience. Lexar's got theirs for 240. There's another Silicon Power that's more in line with that Crucial at 5,000. It's 190. You're definitely getting what you pay for here, okay? So you see those low prices, you've got to pay attention to the speed. Now the benefit of the slower speed is they don't get as hot. Clev, that one's pretty slow. You know what I don't see are those Feijing drives. I wonder what they're going for these days. We were doing the Feijing, Fanxiang S880. Fanxiang, I don't know. Let's click on that link there and see what it brings up. So this is the drive I've been using the most of. 2 terabytes, read speeds up to 7,300 megabytes per second. That's Gen 4, as fast as you can go on Gen 4. There's a 5% coupon bringing that price down by about, what's 5% of 129? About $6? 16, no. $12.99 would be 10%. Half of $12.99 would be 5%. So that would be $6.45. That's not a big savings, but $123 for a Gen 4 drive with a 5-year warranty. Same controller, same NAND chips as the name brands. Same warranty, cheaper price. But do they have 4 terabyte? They do. And it's $289.98. And again, you want to compare that with these speeds. Okay, no 8 terabyte yet. And Team Group, of course, they have their, and I will make an exception, the T series from Crucial, I do like those. That's the T705. I do like these drives. But if you want to go 14,100 megabytes per second, twice the speed of a Gen 4 drive, and you have a Gen 5 compatible motherboard using the heatsink that comes with your motherboard, which they will definitely have on a Gen 5 slot, you're going to pay twice as much for the same amount of storage, but you're going to go twice as fast. So when you look at this number, when it comes to storage, you need to look at this number. And you'll see they're directly related. How fast do you want to go? How much money do you want to spend? Stop focusing on the capacity. Focus on the speed of it. And there's no sense getting something faster than your motherboard can totally handle, or you're wasting your money. If you wait until you buy a new motherboard, because if your thought is, oh, you know what? I plan on replacing my motherboard, so I'll just be ready. You're spending way too much money, in my opinion. These drives only get cheaper. So if you don't end up replacing your motherboard for a year, that same drive will be significantly cheaper than it is today. So buying it today to save money is costing you money. And if for some reason you just don't get around to changing your motherboard, there was no point in it. And if you're planning on changing your motherboard sooner than that, then change your motherboard first, okay? Then get the NVMe drive. You're doing it backwards and you're spending money you don't need to spend for something you may never fully utilize. If I was your father telling you how to spend your allowance, this is the advice I'd be giving you, young man or young lady. Bill wants to know, how do I check what kind of RAM I have? It's not about what kind you have. Like, it's not about the brand. It's about, is it DDR4 or DDR5? I always run a utility called CPU-Z, and it's a free download. And you'll see me run that all the time. And I can see what the RAM is. I just demonstrated it in, I think it was just yesterday's video. No, not yesterday. Day before that, Monday, when we were looking at the minis forum, I ran CPU-Z and I showed you all of those tabs and how I can see the RAM and all the details of it. Maybe you didn't watch that, but I'd recommend go back and watch Monday's video, and you can fast forward to, you see me working on the mini PC and you'll see the desktop. That's when I run CPU-Z, and that will give you all your RAM information. Now, if your machine is a pre-built machine, not something you built yourself, you can always go to the RAM manufacturer's website, like Crucial's website or Kingston's website, and put the make and model of your computer in, and it should tell you what's available. Now, if you've got 32 gigs of RAM now, likely adding any more memory to that is just flushing your money down the toilet. It's highly unlikely you will benefit from having more than 32 gigs of RAM. You're just wasting money, in my opinion, and I would use that money for something that you would actually use. If you press Control-Alt-Delete and go to your task manager, you can see how much RAM you're using at all times. I will be shocked if you're using any more than 20 gigs of RAM. So not only are you not using, in most cases, the 32 you have, you're not going to use anything above that either. But you risk damaging your computer or getting incompatible RAM, spending money you don't need to spend to end up creating a computer problem you never would have had that has no benefit and only has a potential downside. I would not recommend that for you. If you have 16 gigs of RAM, you're probably fine. Bumping to 32 probably isn't worth it, but you may see a slight performance increase. If you're an extreme power user, I think you would have already had 32 gigs of RAM. This machine at 48 is 2 sticks of 24, which is way more than this machine will probably ever use in its lifetime. Or if it does need extra RAM, it swaps out to that very, very fast NVMe drive, which doesn't really impede the performance that much anyway, thereby making it kind of a waste of money for me to put 48 in here. But since I did kind of a waste of money on an overkill cooler, it's a waste of money on an overkill case and an overkill power supply. Everything about this machine is in excess. And in all likelihood, if I were to use this as a streamer, I will be using 5% of the resources of this computer. 95% of what I bought was completely unnecessary. However, if the machine were to be sold or if my needs change and I suddenly start using really resource-intensive applications, then it depends on the application. But what we all can universally, generally speaking, benefit from is faster storage and larger capacity of storage, generally. We can all benefit from a bigger monitor. We can benefit from a nicer keyboard or mouse. That's where your money should be going. Better speakers, better headphones. If I were you, I'd be focusing on something that will make a difference, not on something that might. Did I miss contributions? Let me go back through the viewer activity tab here. Mike Quinton with a $10 super chat. I'm going to just repeat these. Peter with a €5 super chat. Planet Cryos with a $5 super chat. James Goddard became a member. Right on. Thanks, James. Welcome to the Tech Club. Chico48 with a $10 super chat. Giordani renewed his membership. Good to see you again, Giordani. David Graham with a $2 super chat. Mark Gaines earlier with a £10 super chat. And our friend Buster out of Scotland started us off today with a £10 super chat. Thank you guys, as always. And I'll check the phone and we'll get out of here. I want to remind you the deal is still going on, the special sale at Acronis. You don't use any coupon codes from us. Just go to Acronis and buy it. 50% off until, I think it's December 4th, is it? Our friends over at RoboForm, it's still 30% off for new customers. And of course, the SCD keys, they've got their Black Friday sale going on. Use coupon code CARRY to get 30% off of that. It's a pretty good deal. So you get really inexpensive and legal, legitimate, supported, guaranteed Windows and Microsoft Office license keys. You don't have to roll the dice and hope the seller on eBay, is selling you a legit product, because eBay doesn't allow those sales, by the way. They'll list them. I don't know why eBay allows the listing, but as soon as you make the purchase, that account will be closed. That's why those sellers don't have any feedback. They just create a new account and start over again. And then the internal messaging system to talk to them is gone because their account's closed. They can't send or receive messages on eBay anymore. There's no support. And emails. I don't think we missed anything today. Yeah, I think we're good. If you've sent something, sometimes my phone doesn't update right. So I apologize if I missed any of your contributions sent through PayPal or Amazon gift cards. I don't think there have been any today, but if there have been, I'll make a note to remind myself to thank you next time. But I'm not seeing anything right now. So thank you guys again for hanging out with me today. And Ron wants to know why he picks expensive hobbies. I think all hobbies are expensive. Video editing uses lots of RAM. No, it doesn't. See, what you understand, here's the problem. The way Adobe Premiere utilizes your computer resources is very different than the way Cyberlink Power Director uses computer resources. And so if your computer resources are heavy in RAM, that's because of the application you're voluntarily choosing to use. If you use a different application, then that application may require a higher end graphics card or a higher end I/O. In some cases, what you think is making it faster isn't. In other cases, it is, but only for that specific program. But there are other programs that accomplish and do the same job that do it in a different way. So for you, you might notice a difference in video rendering, but it depends. How big are the videos you're rendering? What application are you using? How many transitions and overlays and tracks are you combining, right? Because that's going to complicate it. The length of the video, is it a 360-degree video? Is it a 3D video? Is it an 8K video? Is it a 10-second video? Is it a 30-second video? In which case, it probably doesn't make any difference at all because you couldn't save more than 30 seconds in processing, more or less. So all of these variables mean you cannot make a bold statement that blankets the entire industry and just blindly say more RAM helps. It's just not true. If you're doing what you're doing the way you're doing it with the software you're using and more RAM is helping you, you can say that. But to mislead other people into thinking that is a universal resolution that covers all video editing is completely wrong, just so you know. Okay, maybe you didn't know that. All right, I know, I do a lot of video editing and RAM isn't making any difference. I'm just telling you. My videos process faster with an Intel internal graphics card than any external graphics card. And I am using Cyberlink Power Director. And we can render two videos, one on an NVIDIA 4090 Ti and one on an internal graphics on an Intel chip. And the internal graphics on the Intel chip, because Power Director is optimized for that, will finish upwards of 70% faster without the added expense of the graphics card. And whether I have 32 gigs or 64 gigs or 96 gigs won't make any difference whatsoever. I'm just telling you, I've been through all this and it's all a waste of money and it's all delusion. But I don't know your scenario and I can't speak for you, but nor should you be speaking for anybody else. It's just not that simple. Maybe in the Mac world it is, because you can only use this application or that one, and you can only have this Mac or that Mac, right? So then you could say, the results of adding more on this platform will likely have the same result for you too, because they're all the same. Quail says, I am using 64 gigs of RAM and I can play Doom just fine. That's because you're not using 64 gigs of RAM. You have it, but you're definitely not using it. It's kind of like me with the treadmill. I have a treadmill, but it's really not having any effect because I'm not using it. All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the interaction. It's always good fun. And I got a little work to do as far as polishing on this. I'll add the Strimer cable just for fun, but that's just all this is a power extension cable that lights up. So you just like if the cable wasn't long enough that goes to the motherboard power, it's just an extension, and then you give it, oddly, you have to give it the cable power and plug it into an ARGB header, and you're done. So you're adding more cables, but then it also gives us an additional point of RGB, and it's all made by Lian, so it should be very easy to have it all synchronized together. It's expensive. This little cable's about $50 to $80 for just that stupid thing, when a regular power cable that goes to a power supply is about $8. If you want your RGB, you can have it. Just show me the money. That's what the manufacturers say. And this RGB from Lian is obviously a better user experience than some of the stuff you can get from like AliExpress or whatever, where you're sort of on your own to figure it out. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving Day tomorrow. And we will start, once again, we will start our live stream of a replay of all 8 parts of Doug Bett's Big Beast build at about 9 o'clock tonight. So in about 4 hours, I'll start that. And that will run for 29 hours with the chat room open. I may not be here. I may pop in and out throughout the night or throughout tomorrow with my phone just to say hello and check in. But overall, you will be watching a replay, but you'll be able to interact with each other as you have been today. So I hope you'll enjoy that, and perhaps some football. That'll wrap it up for me. Thank you to Mara, of course, for all the work she does in the background, and to our friends at Acronis, Roboform, and SCD Keys, which again is back to accepting PayPal, so you can choose if that's your preferred way to pay for your Windows or Office keys. And they're all having, well, Acronis is having their Black Friday special, and again, no link from us, just go to Acronis, it's right there. SCD Keys is running their Black Friday special, and you can still use our 30% off coupon to stack. So you can save, it's a good time to save money. That'll be it. I'm done. I need to eat. Thank you guys. Thank you for your memberships, your friendships, and your interaction and support, your kindness. I really appreciate that. And this community is so amazing. I can't thank you enough for being a part of it. I'll see you all on Friday with our ProArt build. Until then, bye for now.